And you're all set.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Select Board meeting, March 1st, 2022. I call the meeting to order at 6:30. First item on the agenda is public comment. If we have any attendees that would like to speak, please just raise your hand. You're certainly welcome to. I will ask one more time. If anyone would like to speak under public comment, there is another public comment at the end of the meeting as well. You're certainly welcome to speak then too. All right, seeing no one, we'll move to our first item. Interview appointment of Michelle McDonald. Is she in our attendees? I see a Michelle. I'm assuming that might be her. If we could bring her over, please. Good evening, Michelle. I'm assuming you're Michelle McDonald.
I am. Now you can hear me, correct?
We can, Michelle. Thank you so much. Welcome to Southborough, and thank you for stepping forward to serve on the Cultural Arts Council. We're always happy to have new people come to town and new people volunteer as well. So it's our pleasure to have you here. If you'd like to take just a minute or two, introduce yourself to us, tell us what interested you in the Arts Council, and then we'll open it up to the board for questions and comments.
Absolutely. As way of background, as you know, I recently moved to Southborough. We moved here in August, and we moved from Lancaster. When I was in Lancaster, I was on the Lancaster Cultural Council for 6 years, which was the maximum term. And I really enjoyed my time there. And when I was researching the Southborough Cultural Arts Council, it was interesting to see that the priorities that Southborough had were very, very similar to what we found in Lancaster, although we were a very different town demographically. And we had used our priorities from the questionnaire that we had set that was required every 3 years from the Mass Cultural Council. And I also like seeing that your guidelines were very similar to what we had in Lancaster. We did have to add a couple of others that we found that were specific to issues that we had seen. So I enjoyed serving my time there. And I actually asked Jim, the town clerk, who is phenomenal, if serving at 6 years at Lancaster, that meant I could never serve again in Massachusetts on a cultural council. And he said, no. I did check it also with the Mass Cultural Council, and they said being 6 years at one spot did not preclude me from being another 6 years at another spot. So that is my interest and my background.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And you are right. Mr. Haggerty is a wonderful man. So
he's
very
phenomenal.
He's very helpful to many. So I'll open it up to Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for coming tonight and for applying for this. Have you had a chance to watch any of the Southborough meetings for the Cultural Arts Council?
You know, I haven't, only because I wasn't sure where to see them. And I know that sounds awful. And I think it's probably because I just arrived in town in August and just getting my cable up and going. Things weren't really up and going until September. So unfortunately, I haven't.
Okay, well, it sounds like you have a great background and this is of interest to you. So welcome to town, and I look forward to your appointment.
All right, Mr. Healy.
Yeah, hi, Ms. McDonald, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Very quick question. You said one of the things that caught your eye were some similarities between the priorities in Southborough and Lancaster. I'm wondering just one or two that in particular, if you can recall, that you might have focused on.
Yes, one of the things, and as I say, Lancaster is very different demographically from Southborough. It is a younger town, and it is, quite honestly, a poorer town. But both of the towns really were looking for events that would be low or no cost to people, and also serving the greatest number of people. When I looked at what was recently funded for Southborough, it mirrored what we used to do in Lancaster. The bulk of our town funding would go to the schools and also to any specific, I should say, cultural issues that were specific to the town. So I thought that was very interesting that although we were very different for towns, the focus was the same.
Great. And I suspect you'll find that there's an awful lot of energy for the folks on the cultural side of things. They've done some great events here in Southborough, and I'm sure you'll be able to contribute to that. And one final note, I love Lancaster. I mean, Southborough is great. Southborough is great and welcome, but I love Lancaster.
You know, the funny thing is we moved from Lexington to Lancaster, and when we were moving, nobody knew where Lancaster was. And then when I moved here, and I'm in a condo development, no one knew where Lancaster was. I would have to say, well, it's, you know, south of Harvard, east of Leominster, north of Clinton, very small town.
Yeah, nice little place, though. Thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stiver.
Thank you. Welcome, Michelle. Thanks very much for volunteering. I think this is an important role. I've always looked to the Arts Council to make important contributions to what I think of as sense of community cohesiveness. They do a lot of wonderful programs to bring people together in ways that they wouldn't be brought together without those programs, which I think is an important contribution to sort of how the community hangs together. And I'm curious, what kind of arts background do you have? Quickly, are you a painter, sculptor, whatever?
I would love to tell you I am none of the above. I have a background. I had worked in education from high school down to kindergarten. And I think it's because I have absolutely no artistic, no musical background, no scientific background. It's why I appreciate what people propose to do for those grants. When I read the grants that we had in the past from Lancaster, what is out there in the arts community is so phenomenal. And it's sad because I don't think they get the recognition. I don't think they get the pay for what they should. And I guess it's because I have no background in it that I can say, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
I'm sorry that I have absolutely no artistic background, being
Not a
quite
problem. Just curious. Again, have had some great people there historically, and I think there's a lot of potential. So thank you again for volunteering.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Mr. Dennington.
Hi, Michelle. I do know where Lancaster is. My parents live by there. It is a nice place.
Goodness.
Yeah. So thank you for your interest. Do you have any particular ideas of new initiatives or things that you would like to focus on?
No, actually, quite honestly, I don't. I'm new to the town, and I think that's probably why I'm interested to see what is coming in to be here. I saw that the funding you had last year was very diverse, going from symphonic to the schools. So I guess what I'm going to do, quite honestly, is I'm going to lean on what the previous members are saying they have seen in the past. It seemed to, quite honestly, that seemed to fly in the town. When I was in the on the council in Lancaster, what we tried to do is we tried to go to events to see how successful they were. Unfortunately, in Southborough, I kind of missed everything just because of when I moved in and the COVID thing. Otherwise, I would have liked to seen what what's important, what's really piquing people's interest between young children up to, and I have to say I'm a senior. What's the whole span? What is really what is interesting and what's important to the town to be funded?
Thank you.
And your mom and dad live in Lancaster?
No, they live in Clinton. They live in a part of Clinton which is right on the border with Lancaster.
That's where I lived, right on the Clinton Lancaster border. I lived off of Mill Street Extension, and
I know where that is. Yeah,
so you know the area.
I do. It's very nice.
All right. Is that it, Andrew?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Michelle, I think you're going to enjoy Southborough very much. I think you're going to enjoy the wonderful group that we have currently with the Cultural Arts Council. They've done some pretty cool things. So I think you're going to make fast friends here in Southborough. And I would ask the board if we have a motion to appoint Michelle McDonald to the Cultural Arts Council, term ending 3/1/24. It's a 2-year term.
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, then I'll go first. Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski, Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio, aye. Thank you again, Michelle, for stepping forward. You'll be hearing something from the Selectmen's office. You'll get some official confirmation. And again, thank you so much. And it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so very much. I'm very interested in just jumping in and meeting new people and just seeing how, being a different town, how everything kind of flies here.
It's wonderful. Southborough is a great place.
I have to tell people all the time when they said, how do you like it? I say, I love it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a good rest
Thank
of your
you.
night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next up is a scholarship committee update, Isabel Murphy. Katie, if we could bring Isabel over, that would be great. Good evening, Isabel. Welcome. You are muted.
Should I be on video or not?
There you are. You're good to go.
Hi there. You get to
Hi.
see my kitchen and everything. Hi, thanks everybody for doing this.
So I just want to tell everybody, I have had the most pleasant and wonderful conversations with Isabel. I'm really excited about the update she's going to give us tonight. So I will turn the floor over to you, Isabel.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. Set me up for that. So one of the things that the select board has asked is that since the scholarship committee is a town board, that we give you some frequent updates in terms of where we are, the good news, the bad news, and the, everything in between. So where we are at the moment is in our coffers, we have about $1,500, which is not a lot, but that's from just money that's come in. The Carol Harris Memorial Scholarship at present has about $6,500 left in it. So we anticipate that we'll be able to continue giving that for the next 7 years. We did lose, I think you're aware of the Capital Group commitment that we had for 10 years. There had been a commitment that had been made to continue it, and then we're not exactly sure what happened. The bottom line is, though, that is no longer an option for us. What we do have is some other work that we are working on in terms of further increasing the knowledge of the scholarships and the committee. But one of the other things that I think is most exciting is we've had a proposal, and we would like your acceptance on this, to establish a Linda Hubley Memorial Scholarship. A member of the community has proposed presenting $500 as seed money to begin the scholarship. Their request is that it be in agreement with the Hubley family, that Skip and Tanya are on board, that they're in full support, that there not be any strict regulations except that it be in the spirit that Linda lived in. So they ask that it be given to a student who demonstrates a commitment to their community through volunteerism, environmental protection, and/or ongoing education in this area or these areas. What the scholarship committee would like to do is to use that money and present it as sort of a matching fund, so that we would put it out there and start asking for additional donations in Linda's name. We are asking for the support of the select board in line with that, and any and all other marketing ideas that you have to help us increase donations to the scholarships and also to this one in itself. Needless to say, we've got a lot more to talk about, but I'm going to take a breath and get your reactions.
Great. Isabel, I think this is wonderful. Linda gave a heck of a lot to this town in so many different ways. The Hubley family as a whole. So I think it's wonderful that you're looking to do this. And I think the town can certainly help you in getting the word out. We could certainly utilize the tweeting that Miss Hale does, using the newsflash on the town website. I'm sure that, members here as well would be happy to spread the word through social media, through contacts that we even have. Again, it's such a worthy cause, and it pays tribute to Linda, but it also helps those that want to advance their future, to get a better future. So again, I think it's great. I think you're going to find full support from this board and trying to help you in any way that we can. I'll not try to speak for everybody, which I just did, but we'll just kind of go around, and we'll start with you this time, Mr. Healy.
Hey, Isabel, how are you?
Hey, Marty.
Nice to see you. A great idea. Fundraising is not my strength, but donating is. So
Okay.
either directly from you folks or from Vanessa, I just think it's a great idea. And I'll add that one of the highlights of the year is always getting over to the when you all make your scholarship presentations, and it's an enormous plus for the town. So I look forward to what else you have to say, and at some point tell me how Patrick's doing out, and is he still in California?
Absolutely. And Marty, what I'd like to do also, one of the things that the board voted on today is we would like to ask the select board again to present the scholarships at a select board meeting the way that you did last year. I know years ago there was a big event that was done. I believe it was at the community house. And what we were hoping to do was kind of combine both of them. If we could present the scholarships at a select board meeting, and then maybe have a room within the townhouse where we could have the families there for photographs and get the best of both worlds. But again, leave that up to you guys if that would be okay.
I can't imagine I'll leave that to the chair, but I can't imagine that's not workable on our end. So again, nice to see you.
Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. Good evening, Isabel. Good to see you.
Yeah.
And you guys do great work. I think this is a wonderful idea, and we'll be happy, I think, to support it any way we can. So keep up the good work, and thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Dennington.
Thank you. I also think it's a great idea, and I look forward to supporting it.
Thank you. Ms. Malinowski.
Hi, Isabel.
Hey,
Thanks
Chelsea.
for bringing this idea forward. I didn't know Linda Hubley, but from what I hear, this sounds like very appropriate to have a scholarship in her name. So I think it's wonderful. And whatever we can do to help you spread the word, or anything, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So I guess, Isabel, that part was easy.
Yep.
And, we will, I'd be happy to coordinate with you on helping to get some of this stuff done and helping to get the word out. And, we can certainly do that sooner rather than later. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be back to meeting in person soon. So when you do the scholarships, we can kind of do it like we did in the past, which would be great with the board participating.
That would be great. So Brian and Carla have been wonderful about helping us in terms of the process of getting all of the, backside done in terms of getting the account set up. Our ask would be that if you could let people know, put a banner on the website. I'll talk to you, Lisa, about some of the specifics. We wanted to get your approval before we put it out into My Southborough, and then kind of going from there. So thank you again for all of your support.
Well, thank you for all the good work. I mean, you guys came together last year, in the middle of COVID, right before kids were graduating. And, the last 2 years, you guys have still been able to get your job done. So please share our thanks and take it back to the scholarship committee. And we'll definitely be talking soon, Isabel.
Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right. Next up, Ms. Cassell, interface update and unplugging day. All right. Good evening, Sarah. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Very good. Welcome. I'm actually going to hand this one off to Chelsea because I know Chelsea's been working with you guys pretty closely. So I'll kind of let her do the introduction here. And but again,
good.
Nice to see you.
You too.
Right. Thanks, Sarah, for coming. And Sarah and I, as you know, I'm her liaison for the board. So we meet every month to touch base on what's going on. And we thought it would be a good time for her to give an update on the interface program, because we've had it up and running for a year now. And I know it's gotten a lot of use. So I asked her if she wouldn't mind presenting some information for us so that we could hear how successful it's been to help our residents during an extremely challenging time. And also so she could give a plug for Unplugging Day this weekend. So go ahead, Sarah.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share information about what we're seeing and how things are going in our department. To start with Interface, just in case anybody's unaware of what Interface Referral Service is, it's a mental health and wellness helpline that matches callers of subscribing communities to mental health providers, meeting their search criteria. So as Chelsea said, we have been using Interface now for a year. We were very grateful to the Southborough Community Fund for supporting a grant proposal that we had put forth to them. I feel like I'm in a time warp. It was in 2020 that we had asked for those funds, which they were very generous in supporting our first year contract, which allowed us just in time for 2021 to start a year-long contract with Interface, which came at an incredibly important time as the mental health landscape and field has been quite overwhelmed with need. So Interface has worked really beautifully with the model in our department because for a long time, our department has had an interest in transitioning away from long-term support for residents and sort of providing bridge services and really beefing up more of our referral services. And so with Interface in the system, it really helps us to have a mechanism for identifying long-term supports for people, which was not something that we were able to do easily on our own. This is a group of dedicated full-time staff, a whole team of them dedicated completely to helping people find openings with appropriate mental health providers that meet their search criteria, which is quite a tall order for anyone. And so we're really grateful to have the whole team of Interface staff helping Southborough residents with that, which really has meant that our clinicians and our staff can have immediate openings for people who have urgent needs. They can come in and see us and we can help them with managing any symptoms that they're having, support them, assess how they're doing, establish some preliminary goals, and really help prepare them for moving on to their long-term provider. Some cases we experience a lot more barriers, and so sometimes people have to stay with us longer, but Interface has really been instrumental in enabling us to have to serve more residents and to have those immediate openings so that we can move people on to long-term sustainable support. So in 2021, we had 86 Southborough residents utilize Interface, which when you don't have any comparisons, it's not really clear whether that's a high level of use or not. So just to share a comparison, this is based strictly on what I've received from other neighboring communities. So another one of our neighboring communities that has a population of around 13,000, they had a total of 86 referrals in 2020. Another community of around 17,000 had 105 referrals in 2020. I have not been able to access 2021 data for neighboring communities quite yet. It's whether they want to offer that to me or not. So, but so our level of usage is is on par with communities around us. In fact, a community of 13,000 is larger than Southborough, and they had the same number of referrals in 2020. So we've been getting great value for the cost that we've spent on this, and we're very appreciative to have them. I will highlight that Interface had to take a 3-week temporary pause in February. And this was because even for a team of individuals who are dedicated exclusively to help finding openings, they themselves had to put a pause on any new intakes because they were having trouble responding and matching people with providers. So I'm happy to report that they're back online with accepting new referrals as of the 22nd of February. But we do like to make sure residents are aware that despite the fact that Interface is back online now, we anticipate that this high level of demand is going to continue. And so for that reason, we really like people to be aware of the mental health services that and support that they can get through our office as well, because they may end up waiting for a period of time before they can get support from Interface. Do you want me to stop here to see if there's any questions about Interface before talking about National Day of Unplugging?
Yeah, I think that would be great, Sarah. We'll just kind of go around. We'll start with Mr. Dennington.
I don't have any real specific questions. I do remember the discussion about this at when I was maybe my last year on the advisory committee, and it's good that you are coming to us with a follow-up, so I know how it's doing. And I think that one of the questions I was going to ask is are you having any challenges with this kind of national, regional problem of mental health providers being overloaded? It sounds like there are some problems, but you're working through them, and it's good to hear.
Yeah, and I'll just reflect, even though, some may react with frustration about Interface having to take that pause and not being able to respond to new needs. I just appreciate the fact that we have them and imagine what it would be like if we didn't. So even though we've had some barriers, it's been really critical support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sam. I actually skipped you. You were supposed to be first on this one. So we'll come to you now and I'll get you first on the next one.
That's okay. I defer to Andrew. Sarah, thanks very much for the update. I think this is a great program. And again, it's important to provide expanded capacity for these kind of services in the town. I think this is a great opportunity to leverage the staff that we have locally. And I continue to believe that there's a huge underserved need in this area out there that people don't hear about. And I have heard at Youth Commission meetings the observation that people would be astounded at the number of folks in town that have been helped by Youth and Family Services. And it's very, again, low visibility. People are not advertising that they're clients of Youth and Family Services, but I have to believe, given the pressures from the economy and society and COVID and so forth, that this is very difficult times for people. And in my mind, this is a critical service, and I'm delighted that we have access to this resource. So thank you for making this happen, and keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Mr. Haley.
Yeah, hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
A great idea. I mean, great idea and great work. I am not a creature of social media, and I'm wondering if your the way these services. I mean, obviously we've got the website and the town website and everything. But what's the most effective way that you're making contact with folks? Is it through social media? Is it through word of mouth? Is it something else? And is that an area where the town might be able to be helpful?
All of the above. No, we try. the answer to your question is yes, we would appreciate all the help we can get with, I mean, it's a double-edged sword because we're a small team and we're responding to high levels of need already. However, we want people to know we're here. It's really important. And so, yeah, we appreciate any opportunity we can get to do more outreach. So we welcome any ideas that you have. The way that we let people know about the services we offer are through various methods. We use social media, we use our website. Everything we advertise, we do so through all of the schools. So we ask all of the principals to share the information with families. Often we're advertising through other town departments. We use My Southborough, and then also following a strategic planning process that we engaged in 2020, we recognized the need to establish more outreach services. And so on a regular basis, which isn't easy during COVID and especially COVID in winter, but we try very hard to at least once to twice a month do something in person where we're attending a meeting or, you know, going somewhere where people are already to hand out information. So we try a variety of different things.
Okay, great. And my final somewhat unrelated note is I'm curious as whether or not you and your cohorts have sent a video over to Good Morning America. Occasionally on the elliptical, I'll tune into a tape of Coffee Talk, and it's
we put a pause on Coffee Talk when we were able to return in person, but that was one of our absolute favorite projects during this pandemic, and we still have everything on our website, and we refer people to those episodes frequently. So maybe it'll make a comeback at some point.
Well, I encourage you to think about that. All right,
Thank
nice
you.
to see you. Take care.
You too.
Great. Sarah, I'll go and then I'll take it back to Chelsea. Congratulations on putting the interface in place. You know, I had a lot of questions on it when it first came, and I am just so extremely happy that it has turned out as positive and as well that it has, and so many people have been able to be helped. So from someone that was a little skeptical at first about it, I'm telling you, I'm your cheerleader and your hero on this. I will, again, so pleased and so happy. And I know of some people that have been able to get help through Youth and Family. So I thank you for that, and continue the good work. And I'll punt it back to Chelsea. I don't know if Chelsea wants to add anything to that or lead into the next.
So the only thing that I'll add is I think Sarah, her team, and the Youth Commission have done a great job of kind of pivoting their model. And I'm sure that wasn't an easy task to do, but I think in the long run, it's benefiting more residents, and it's providing more sustainable, resources for our residents. So I just want to make sure that that's recognized, that, Sarah's totally changed how they operate. And I think that is, it's great. And she did it without adding any staff. So, so thank you for that, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. I'll add, this is hard to parse out, but we, since the addition of interface and since we've transitioned to a shorter term model, but also since we've had an increased demand, our mental health services in the department have gone up 64% in the last year. Again, I can't figure out completely whether that's due to demand or if it's due to this new model, but I'm just happy to report that we've had the capacity to offer support to that many more people. So should I go ahead and talk about Unplugged too? Before I plug Unplugged, I'd love to just make people aware that we've got a lot of really great programs that we're rolling out right now. Specifically, we have some really fantastic suicide prevention trainings that are really geared for any audience. And I really encourage you to take advantage of them. They're free. Our program coordinator, Shannon Knyman, is offering those at least twice a month, evenings and weekends. So please consider getting trained in QPR, which is question, persuade, and refer. We also have 2 other programs. One is a communication workshop called Listen with Love. We know that people have high levels of stress right now and are trying really hard to support each other because we're often waiting for mental health providers, and sometimes parents or family members are in a position where they have to possess the skills themselves to recognize when someone's in distress and how to respond to that. So that's another workshop that we want people to be aware of. And then finally, we have a parent support group that we're starting this month. We've heard from so many parents who are just trying to figure out, we don't have a manual for how to support our children sometimes. And so we know that getting together with other parents can be really helpful in talking about it. And our staff will be there to support parents as well. So I can't obviously go through all of the details, but please visit our website. We have more information on that. And so to end with sharing information about National Day of Unplugging, some of you may remember Southborough Unscheduled, which was a non-event that our department was sort of involved with in orchestrating between the town side and the school side. And over the years, it became more and more difficult for everybody to sort of agree on one date to unplug. And so for a while, we stopped doing Southborough Unscheduled. And we continued with a program called Press Pause, which is along the same spirit of Southborough Unscheduled, to encourage people to take breaks from screen use and bring awareness to technology addiction. And while we continue to do work in Press Pause, we became aware of National Day of Unplugging, which is put on by a nonprofit called Unplug Collaborative. And this is something that they do every year. And we are, I'm not ashamed to say, we're using their we're on their tailcoats, I guess I should say. So they do this annual campaign every year, and we thought it would be really fun to use what they do to bring that to Southborough. So you've probably seen online, we've had a number of people, some of you have participated, putting up signs talking about how you unplug. And it's ironic because we're doing this online, but that's where people get their information, and hopefully they're feeling inspired to take a break and participate. And it's almost an experiment of sorts, because I don't know how many of us go 24 hours without a screen of any kind or technology of any kind, but really great opportunity to give it a try with your family members. And we appreciate that you are highlighting this in the context of your meeting today. And so I should mention, so National Day of Unplugging is sundown to sundown on March 4th to March 5th, which is coming up just the end of this week.
Thank you, Sarah. I will tell you, I'm going to unplug, and if I get in trouble for doing it, or somebody's trying to reach me and they can't, then that's okay.
That's right.
Yeah, but thank you so much, and thank you for doing it. Chelsea, did you want to add anything else? Being the liaison, well, Sarah's here. I mean, I think Sarah was pretty comprehensive in what she covered.
Thanks for coming, Sarah.
Thank you
Awesome.
for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. Have a good night.
You too.
All right. If next we could bring in Superintendent Martineau, and he can let us know, I'm assuming Ms. Pellegrino, Mr. Challen, I'm just kind of flipping through the list here real quick. Mr. Desmond, let's see, Ms. Tollander.
And I believe that is all.
Okay, Mr. Desmond still isn't over. We're going to shoot him over as well. All right, I'm just gonna follow the list for a minute. Superintendent, just make sure we have everybody. Okay, I think that looks like everybody. Good evening and welcome. As always, it's a pleasure to have you here with us tonight. We have you on the agenda to talk about the fiscal year 23 budgets, warrant articles, and while you're here as well, I am going to bring up under our consent agenda, we had to approve the MSBA project submission for Woodward and Finn schools. In case the board has any questions for you on that, and then we can just move the vote up and take it on that as well. So again, welcome. I turn the floor over to you. If you would like to start with the budgets, that would be great. Before we go there, does any of your committees have to call their meeting to order? I don't see a quorum of anybody. No.
No.
Okay, perfect. All right, Superintendent, you have the floor. Thank you.
All right, first of all, thank you for having us this evening to present the FY23 school committee voted budget. Before I begin, I just want to thank the district leadership team and the finance team at the central office for all its hard work in preparing many of the documents that you received in your packet. So I'll give a high-level overview of the Southborough budget pre-K through 8, and then answer any questions. I promise I will not go through the entire budget booklet for you, but we'd be happy to answer any questions. And then once that is completed, I will move to the regional budget and give a high-level overview, and again, answer any questions that you may have. So I'm going to share my screen. So I'll begin by talking about kind of the work that we do as a public school system, and it's really mission and vision oriented. So our mission as a district is quite simple. It's educate, inspire, and challenge. And our center is really around making sure students have a great experience in our educational system. And our vision as an organization really is thinking about what types of students we want to graduate from Algonquin Regional High School, or the next grade level, or the next school. And really, we really want students to leave being great collaborators, critical and creative thinkers, communicators, students who are socially and civically engaged, growth-oriented, and healthy and balanced. So as we looked at the FY23 fiscal landscape, we did identify some budget variables early on in the budget process. And specifically, we identified 3 budget variables. The first is Chapter 70 funding and new legislation, specifically the Student Opportunity Act. And as the FY23 state budget moves forward, we are advocating that the Student Opportunity Act, and specifically special education transportation reimbursement, be funded at a higher level. And secondly, the other variable was out-of-district special education funding, which is known as circuit breaker, and making sure that that's funded at an appropriate level. And lastly, new to the budget process and the variable is inflation. We are seeing the impact of the purchasing power of $1, and we're monitoring that very closely. In terms of the work that we do around planning and preparing the budget, the school committee does approve budget priorities. And the budget priorities this year that the school committee identified were to fund the high priority items in our Vision 2026, Educate, Inspire, and Challenge, to implement innovative instructional practices, engage students in development and demonstrating their knowledge and skills, providing students access to challenging and culturally responsive learning experiences, prioritizing social and emotional physical well-being of students and staff, demonstrating continual growth through professional collaboration and development to support best practice and programs. Maintain and improve sustainable, efficient, attractive, and well-maintained schools, maintain student-to-teacher ratios, sustain a multi-year technology cycle of renewal and growth and maintenance, and lastly, recruit, maintain, and support high-quality staff. And these budget priorities, along with the strategic plan and school improvement plans, really center our work and help us make decisions as we move through the budget process. So in terms of the fiscal year 2023 recommended budget, the school committee voted an FY23 budget of $22,283,443, which is a recommended budget increase of $549,009, which represents a 2.53% over fiscal year 22. For the most part, it's a level service budget. And I always remind the community that we do have a high level of services in our educational system, and we're very fortunate. In terms of the growth areas that are in the fiscal year 2023 budget, we are adding a special education classroom to meet the needs of some of our learners. And this is a cost share with the public schools of Northborough. In order to create that classroom, we need a full-time teacher, and Southborough's portion of that particular program is 0.5. And then secondly, we need 3 educational support professionals to support the students who will be entering into that specialized program. We're also adding a 0.2 FTE reading specialists, specifically at Finn. At Neary and Woodward, we have a full-time reading specialist, and this will provide an equivalent level of service at Finn with a 1.0 reading specialist. And lastly, we are adding a 1.0 full-time equivalent reading tutor at Finn and Woodward. And this is really in response to some of the learning and the challenges that some of our students have faced as a result of the pandemic over the past year and a half. So we are hiring a tutor that would work directly with a reading specialist and be deployed under that person's responsibility. So in this budget, we're adding 4.7 full-time equivalent positions for a total of $171,348. And then lastly, kind of a historical look at our budget percentages over the past many years. I think we've brought in fiscally responsible and educational sound budgets over the past many years. We feel very strongly that this is an outstanding budget that supports the needs of the learning organization and helps us move the work forward. So at this point in time, I will stop, and I would be happy to answer any questions, as well as Becky Pellegrino.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Mr. Stivers, we'll start with you.
Thanks. I actually don't have any questions. I've reviewed the material, and I think it's, again, a very appropriate budget here. And again, appreciate the cooperation between town and the schools in terms of keeping expenses down and property tax burdens as low as possible on our residents. And I think the schools do a great job with the programs, particularly over the last couple of years. It's been obviously an incredibly challenging time, and I think the response has been very effective. So I think we all look forward to getting back toward a more normal world here as soon as possible. And again, thanks for the good efforts, Greg, you and your staff, and others have done to keep things on track during the COVID period. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Mr. Denny.
Hi, Greg. Thank you. I'm in the same position as Mr. Stivers. I've reviewed it, and I don't have any real detailed questions. As for on the consent agenda, the approval of the MSBA project submission for Woodward and Finn schools. Again, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of ourselves but it would be useful for me to, again, I understand there's been a very long, detailed process of studying this issue. You could remind me again of what stage we are at now and where and what are the next steps.
So Andrew, I'm just going to jump in here. The plan was to do the budgets, the warrants, and then at the very end go through this. I mean, if that's okay with you, then
That's
I
okay
figured,
with me.
Greg could give a more detail than you're looking for. I just wanted to try to keep them separate. So unless you have an issue with that, we can certainly jump around.
Nope.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. And thanks, Greg and team, for coming. I do have a few questions. on the growth areas that you referred to for the reading specialists, do you think that that's in response to the pandemic? And do you think, if so, do you think that we could be seeing more need in the future for those types of positions?
So I think it's a great question. It's really about parity in this budget. It's making sure that we have a full-time reading special in each of our elementary schools, and specifically at the early childhood level, where reading, or that early intervention and learning how to read is so essential. Our students scored very well on MCAS in terms of that metric. But we are, looking very closely at students' academic performance, and the reading tutor is in response to making sure that we have the resources to support some of the students who might need more time learning how to read.
Okay, thank you. And I know you listed out all the state funds that you have received and kind of when that ending period is. Are you anticipating that? I think it's harder at the younger grades because we don't have MCAS until a certain grade level, but are you anticipating that the state's going to monitor academic progression and provide more funding to kind of supplement additional academic support over the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, there are many grant opportunities through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as a result of the past 2 years and what communities have experienced. In fact, there are so many grant opportunities, it's often difficult to keep up and keep pace. But there are accelerated learning academies, there are many grants, and we're trying to pursue all the opportunities that we can. But I do anticipate seeing additional opportunities for students and programs as a result.
Okay, great. And my last question on the K through 8 is in terms of, and this may be an unfair question because Keith's not here, but in terms of buses, I think one of the concerns that I experience, and I know several other people, are, you have a kindergartner who's going through 2 other schools before they get dropped off in the morning. And would you be able to quantify how much it would cost to streamline that process or make that more efficient so that kids aren't sitting on a bus as long as they are? And I don't know that that's true for all the routes, to be perfectly frank. I just know the ones that I've experienced. So just, and it's unfair for me to ask you for a number for that, but that would definitely be something I'd be interested in exploring, just to provide a shorter day for the smaller children.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for the questions. It's hard to believe we've implemented a later start time at the high school. This fall, feels like many moons ago. But in terms of adding buses, it's about $75,000 to add additional buses to our routes. And not a single bus would solve, the problems. Would be multiple buses. We are working closely with a bus consulting company. Prior to launching the school start time initiative, we worked with school bus consultants who did a thorough analysis and helped us create a baseline of our routing data and trip times and so forth. We're actually partnering with them currently, and they're actually running another analysis for us, identifying potential efficiencies, routes that are a little longer than we'd hoped. And then we're working with our transportation department to be able to streamline and make sure that we do minimize the amount of time students are running on the bus. So that work is underway. We anticipate receiving the report in the next month. And then Keith and the department will be working on actually preparing routes for the upcoming academic year.
Okay, great. And I lied. I do have one more question on K through 8. On your capital schedule, you have 2 items for paving. And do you have, on that sheet, I don't see the funding source on there. Can you explain if that's hitting general fund? Because I didn't see it in a capital item on the warrant.
Yeah, so that is through, and Becky can answer this too. That's through the facilities revolving account. That's through the rental fees that the school takes in, the rental fee that we receive from Northborough and the region for central office, Southborough Extended Day, as well as other opportunities that we rent our space. So it is coming out of that revolving fund.
Okay, and can you explain a little bit with the transition of extended day to being internal to the school department, how that revolving account will be impacted from revenue perspective?
Yeah, so I think that we are taking the program, the before and after school program, internally as part of the work that we did in terms of identifying whether it was fiscally feasible and responsible. We did calculate, what it would cost to continue to try to create that level of revenue in terms of what the rent we get from currently SCDP. However, in our first year, we're very conservative in the amount we're estimating. And we'll know at the end of obviously the first year, but it could impact the amount of revenue we receive as a result that we're not renting the space to an outside organization.
So will the extended day program have its own revolving account? It won't, the revenue from that won't go into this facility. So that's going to reduce the amount that you would have normally seen in this account.
Actually, yes. Yeah.
So Chelsea, I don't know if anyone else hears that Chelsea's very digitalized.
I'll sign out and sign back in. Sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Chelsea. Sorry. Mr. Healy.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, Superintendent and Mr. Challen et al. Nice to see everybody. I guess a comment and maybe two questions. First, the comment. It is while it's increased money, it is always good to see a continued focus in the special ed area. And I had 4 kids who went through the Southborough and Algonquin system and was able to see firsthand the difference that makes for kids. So again, it's good to see that continues to be very much a focus of the spending. And I guess the first question is there any sort of connective tissue that you're seeing between the last 2 years, what kids have gone through, and an increased need for either I don't, classic might not be the right word, but what we might think of as classic special ed services and special ed services that again are flowing directly or strongly indirectly from again what COVID has put kids through the last 2 years.
So I think it's a great question. I think it's really too early to kind of quantify whether we're seeing increased number of referrals. What we're trying to do is put interventions in place for students who just haven't had the opportunity to have access to some of the curriculum. So we're trying to accelerate their learning through additional opportunities. We don't anticipate that we'll see increased special education students as a result of COVID-19. If someone's truly, learning disabled, that's going to present itself just through the natural process of kind of moving through our educational system. But we are putting in place interventions for students who, might need that extra boost as a result of what they experienced in the pandemic.
Marty, before you go to your next question, Mr. Challen has his hand up.
Thank you. So if I could, I wanted to ask this question with Chelsea back on because it relates to, well, actually ask the superintendent to maybe comment on this because it really relates to Chelsea's question about the revolving fund and what will happen when the district takes the program over since you're not getting any rent. If you think about it, and I don't know that these numbers are exact, if you think about the program today before it comes in-house, it's a fee-based program, and the fees go for personnel costs, supplies, and rent. Even by keeping these fees, I guess, flat with no increase, if you think about it, there at least is going to be a certain amount of those fees that would, I'm not going to say equal or approximate, but there would be, it would replace the rent revenue that the program provides the district before. So is that a fair comment, Greg, or can you correct me or maybe add to that?
No, I think that is a fair comment. It is a self-sustaining program, even though it's being run through the district. And there are obviously wear and tear facilities use custodians that we will charge back to the district. And that money charged back goes to, what it would cost us to kind of maintain those spaces. And that money would be deposited into the, facilities revolving account and be used to be invested back into the spaces that the extended day program uses. So that is accurate. And Becky.
Yeah, if I can just add, as part of our analysis, we did speak with a number of other districts who operate in an extended day program in-house. And we did find that, they were charging like a nominal amount of rent so that it could go into that facility rental for just what Greg mentioned for the wear and tear, because they are using the facilities, or if some upkeep needed to be done to the space that they were specifically working in, we would have that ability to use those funds. We are being conservative in our first year because it is the first year we're running the program, so we would not be doing that for next year, but it is something we would be looking at.
Oops, sorry, did that answer your question, Chelsea? You want to say yes so I can hear that you're good now? Sorry.
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Mr. Healy, back to you.
Yep, second question. I was struck, maybe not entirely surprised but struck by the enrollment numbers. Again, harkening back to my four, it looks like they went through at the absolute peak of the numbers in the school system. But the metric, one of them, or a primary metric that was always talked about at the time, I don't know if it's still a primary. Presumably, it's one that you use to some extent. Is class sizes. And what effect is the decrease in enrollment, which it's like 100 in a 3-year grade system, it's like 120 kids. So that's about 40 kids per grade that there's been a reduction from the peak, which is about 10 years ago. Is class size still a critical metric? Is it a moderate metric? And how are the enrollment numbers both current? It's kind of odd that Algonquin still has a drop off coming according to the, damn lies and statistics, but at least in terms of what we see on the paper, Algonquin still has a pretty significant Southborough drop coming, although that doesn't necessarily cross over to what is likely to happen in Southborough. So just what's the outlook, or what's the current status in terms of thinking about class sizes, and what's the outlook for what's likely to come?
Yeah, so I think, if we look over the past 5 years, in terms of declining enrollment, it was projected by NASDAQ that we'd see declining enrollment over a period of time. In terms of class size, the school committee does have a class size policy and has been able to maintain healthy class sizes. As people retire, as people move on to other positions or other careers, we've tried to not fill some of those positions because, again, we're able to maintain healthy class sizes and through attrition kind of reduce the staffing levels that we need. The challenge too is that, not all of the students are located in one grade level. They're distributed across pre-K through 8. So again, depending on, cohorts and sizes of cohorts at certain grade levels, we're able to adjust and accommodate. But our class sizes are healthy. They're within the class size policy and rival many of the surrounding communities in the area.
Okay, great, Lisa, I'm good.
Great. Thank you, Marty. Marty kind of touched on where I was kind of going with class sizes and ratios and, looking to see what the policy was. As a parent, just trying to get an idea of what the sizes are. So I think you've kind of covered that. So I will then just thank the school committee. Roger, please share our thanks with everybody on the school committee for coming forth with a great budget with a lot of detail here. And Greg, the same to you and your staff on this as well. But Roger, please share our thanks for being respectful to the citizens with a smaller increase. And go ahead, Roger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I could just make one comment about the budget. And I know that some of the select board does attend school committee meetings, so they've probably heard budget discussions. But just for the benefit of the select board, when we look at a budget like this one, that for the most part has a very, very high percentage of contracted increases for personnel, you kind of say, well, gee, there's not much left over to fund the other things you need other than people. And we asked that question to the superintendent. And I think it's fair to say that we're comfortable that he was able to answer the question in a way that we believe that we'll be able to continue to offer quality education, even without, even in these times of increased costs, even without much on top of the contracted services, the contracted increases, just because of the way that the budget is managed. So just make that one comment for the select board.
Thank you, Roger. That was one of the other comments I had, that 88% of your increase is through contracted services, through salary increases and COLAs. So again, please share our thanks with everyone for putting in the time and the effort and, and coming in with something really great.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Superintendent, I will put it back to you for the regional school district.
All right, I will share my screen again, and Mr. Desmond is with us. So on February 16th, the Regional School Committee voted the budget for FY23, and this evening I'll present a high-level overview. I will not go into the mission and vision again, since there's continuity pre-K through 12. But in terms of the regional approved budget priorities, the Regional School Committee prioritized social, emotional, and physical well-being of students and staff, especially over the last 2 years, what students have experienced. It's a priority to maintain high-quality staff, instructional programming, and instructional resources, including technology, strive to achieve class size according to school committee policy, prepare students for high levels of success in college and career readiness. Again, fund the initiatives of the school improvement plan and Vision 2026, and create and fund a short and long-term capital plan for the high school. And then lastly, fund the school committee approved initiatives that are recommended by the Coalition for Equity. So in terms of the budget variables at the regional level, similar to pre-K through 8, Chapter 70 funding and Student Opportunity Act. Also health insurance. As you know, the regional district is its own entity similar to the town, so it has to bear some of the costs of health insurance and other insurances. And I know the select board is well aware that Fallon Insurance has exited the commercial insurance market. And as a result, we've been going out to bid for a new insurance contract. So that was a variable as we entered into the budget season. Out of district special education funding, and then lastly, inflation. So in terms of the FY23 recommended budget, the recommended, or the actually voted budget is $25,727,081, which is a increase of $750,378, or a 3% increase over fiscal year 22. One of the growth areas in this budget, actually not really a growth area, but something that the school committee has really made a priority, is to try to reduce many of the fees that families experience as a result of the fees that are incurred at the high school. So one of the fees that the school committee looked at was student activity fees. In the FY23 budget, the student activity fee, which is $50, will be reduced to $25. And then in FY24, it will be removed, so there'll be no student activity fee. Other fees remain, athletic fees and parking fees, but this is a start in the right direction, and something that we felt this budget could move forward. So basically, the Algonquin Regional High School budget is a level services budget. And again, Algonquin Regional High School provides students with many learning opportunities. We have outstanding faculty and staff and excellent class sizes. And we feel a level services budget still allows us to grow and improve learning experiences for our students. So as the board knows, the regional budget does get apportioned by the regional agreement, and each community is impacted by that apportionment. And a key component of that is enrollment. And Northborough's portion of the fiscal 23 budget is 61.08%, and Southborough's portion is 38.92%. And we did see a 2.5% swing in enrollment from Northborough to Southborough in fiscal year 23. So in terms of the apportionment by agreement, the amount left over after we subtract transportation and other Chapter 70 funding is $8,528,372. Southborough's portion is $3,319,242. The minimum local contribution, which is part of the Chapter 70 funding formula for Southborough, is $5,134,573, for a total of $8,453,815. This is a significant difference from the FY22 assessment of $976,082, which is significant. And after some detailed analysis and kind of looking at enrollment, we did see an enrollment shift of about 85 students. So it did impact Southborough. With conversations with the school committee, one of the levers the school committee does have to impact or reduce the assessment of the community is using excess and deficiency. The school committee does have an excess and deficiency policy, and the school committee voted to use $600,000 of E&D to apply to the assessments. And as a result, with $600,000 applied of E&D, Southborough's assessment is $742,562, or a 9.93% increase over fiscal year 22. It's important to note that the overall aggregate budget for the regional district is 3%. And there's very little we can do in terms of internal controls around controlling enrollment. But it is something we try to monitor and project. And it has fluctuated over the years. So this table basically is just kind of an illustration of what the Northborough, Southborough assessment increases have been. And as you can see, over the years, there's been years, for example, in fiscal year 20, where Southborough has had a negative assessment increase. in Northborough's had, a significant increase. So it's very difficult to project what's happening. And to some degree, the assessments are just a nature of what's happening with our enrollment in the Chapter 70 funding formula. So at this point in time, I'd be happy to, Becky and I would be happy to answer any questions and try to provide any further explanation to the board.
Great, thank you. Ms. Malinowski, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. On the enrollment data, do you have a 5 to 10 year projection, assuming that 100% of Milliken and Trotter students go to Algonquin, and what that split would be like? And also a split assuming the last 5-year average of the percentage of Trotter students that went to Algonquin and Milliken students that went to Algonquin.
Yeah, so we do have a projection, and we use our NASDAQ enrollments to project what that percentage would be. We do see a more of a balanced assessment, an enrollment assessment over the next 3 to 5 years. In terms of students who matriculate from 8th grade to Trotter to the high school, this year was a bit of an anomaly for Southborough. Typically, we see anywhere between 80% and 85% of 8th graders matriculate to Algonquin Regional High School. This year it was 92%. The other kind of variable is what was happening in Northborough. Typically, we see greater than 100% enrollment from 8th grade to 9th grade, and that's because we see new families move into Northborough. So typically Northborough from 8th grade to 9th grade is average 100 to 101%. This year it was 92%. So we saw this shifting and balancing of 8th grade students in Northborough and Southborough matriculating into Algonquin. That is a bit of an anomaly, and we're trying to sort out what that means. We do think it has to do with the pandemic, and economy, but unfortunately we'll know more as we see what happens in future data trends. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And my other question, and I don't think you showed this on your slide specifically, but it was in the packet, and it appears that you increased your OPEB contribution this year. Can you just explain why?
Sure, Becky, do you want to field that question?
Sure. So the regional district actually just established the OPEB trust fund. I believe it was 2 years ago now. In FY21, we established that trust fund. And so we were able to start out with about $150,000 in our first year. However, last year we did not fund anything in the OPEB trust. And so this really is just trying to have a placeholder in our budget because we realize the importance of making sure this trust fund is funded. Actually, our last OPEB audit revealed, I think it's about a $44 million OPEB obligation. So we have a long way to go towards funding that. But the school committee did feel that it was important that we move forward with a funding plan.
So, and does Northborough have the same amount that they put into it, or is it an allocation?
So the OPEB would be part of our operational budget, so it would be apportioned by the regional agreement. So it's
Okay.
a flat $25,000 that would be apportioned.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me on region.
Thank you, Mr.
You cut off, Lisa.
Oh, I'm
Did you-
sorry, Mr. Healy. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I really don't have any questions. I'm just curious. It's just a curiosity following up on something Chelsea said. Do you know where the Northborough students went? I mean, did they go, was it to Catholic schools? Was it to, is there data along those lines?
We are trying to collect some data around where students went, but I will share that the real estate market really had an impact in Northborough. We saw a lot of families move from Northborough I think that had an impact on enrollment moving forward.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Otherwise, nice job on the budget presentation, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. My only question was also what's going on with the population shift Northborough versus Southborough. So obviously anything one can learn about that would be hugely helpful. Maybe a financial incentive for Northborough parents to send their kids to Algonquin. We might make money by offering a bonus there, but it'd be very helpful to know, again, what we can find out there and be able to project more accurately what we can plan for, at least, so we won't get surprised going forward. Otherwise, again, good job. Thanks for the update. That's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Dennington.
I don't have any questions that haven't already been asked, but I guess it'll be interesting to see how the Northborough, Southborough enrollment numbers turn out in 2023 to see if this becomes permanent. We'll just have to see.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. I actually have one question on the special education collaborative tuition. Can you just touch on that, what that is and why there was such a, is that something new? Is that a increase?
Sure. So, we're part of the Asabet Valley Collaborative, and they have very specialized programs for students who are not able to meet their needs. So, we've had a number of students who actually are benefiting from the programming at Asabet Valley Collaborative. It's actually a very cost-effective program to send students to. Although we have many great programs at Algonquin Regional High School for our special education students, we are finding that not all students we can meet the needs. And the increase in the Asabet Valley Collaborative is actually a positive, because typically what would happen is students would go to an out-of-district private setting, and the cost of the out-of-district private setting is 2 to 3 and sometimes 4 times the cost of what a collaborative placement is. So although the collaborative costs increased, what we didn't see is an increase in our out-of-district special education tuition.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. I just wasn't sure. So I also had a question on OPEB, and Ms. Malinowski took care of that. So that's all I have for questions. Again, Mr. Desmond, please take our thanks back to the Regional School Committee for, again, a job well done. I don't know if you'd like to add anything to what Superintendent Martineau has said. You certainly are welcome to.
Just one thing, I want to congratulate Greg and Becky and their teams. This was just a really good job. I mean, as you can imagine, the numbers when we first saw them were much higher than what you just saw. And it was just a Herculean effort, really, to get it down to what you saw. And I thought especially using that 600,000 from E&D to get the number to something more palatable was a crucial step. So great job, Greg and Becky and your teams. And I will take your thanks back to the committee. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so that takes care of our budget portion. Instead of just jumping into the warrant articles, Andrew, we're going to come back to the question that you asked regarding the item that we had in our consent agenda. Do you want to ask your question? I didn't mean to cut you off, Andrew. I was just trying to stay on track.
No, I appreciate that. So Superintendent, I guess my question is, for the approval that we're about to consider for the project submission, can you again put this in the larger context of the different steps in this process of consideration of closing Woodward School and consolidating and building a new Neary School? And in this multi-year process, what step are we now in?
Sure. So I think, as the board is aware, it's been a multi-year journey. And I think at the town level, it's been led by the Capital Plan School Research Subcommittee, which is a partnership with the school committee. And it was charged with really analyzing the school facilities and thinking about consolidation as a result of some of the conversations around could the school district consolidate from 3 elementary schools to 2. The district undertook a grade configuration study, and we did several enrollment studies. We worked with 2 NESDEC and RLS to look at enrollment over the next 10 years. And as a result, we also looked at our spaces that we had at Finn, Woodward, and Neary, while also understanding that the town master planning group was working to think about what are the comprehensive needs of the entire community. What we identified through our study was that that we could consolidate into 2 buildings if there was a building project, specifically at Neary School, and that would allow for Woodward potentially to be repurposed for other town use. So where we are, the district did submit a statement of interest for Neary School through MSBA to see if we would be invited into its eligibility phase. So we are currently meeting with MSBA tomorrow to learn whether or not we'll be invited into the eligibility phase. We anticipate that we will be. And as a result, we'll do kind of another study to see around what could the future be of Neary School, and that is through the town's Neary School Building Committee, and it would be charged with kind of looking at that and thinking about what are the options that exist. So I hope that provides some context.
Yes,
and
yep.
more information.
No, it's just a good summary as each step we go. It's useful to keep track of where we are.
That's where I need Mr. Malinowski to provide the summary.
All right, Greg, thank you. So while we're on that subject, Greg, you had provided Mark with a couple of votes that the board needs to take for Trotter and Finn roofs for the SOI. Do you want to touch on that briefly, just to kind of update the board, and we can take those positions while you're here?
Sure. So the MSBA has 2 programs, the core building program, which is what we submitted for the Neary School. And also MSBA has an accelerated repair project, and it's specifically for roofs, boilers, and windows. So we have identified, the Finn roof for accelerated repair project. And in terms of Woodward School, one of the requests of MSBA when we submitted the SOI for Neary School was that they also wanted us to submit a statement of interest for the core building program for Woodward School, because we had discussed that might be part of a larger comprehensive project. So through MSBA's request, that is why the Woodward SOI is in your packet for a potential approval for the board this evening.
Great, thank you. We'll just go around quick and see if anyone has any questions. Mr. Healy.
I do not. Been through this before.
Mr. Stivers.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Dennington. No questions. Ms. Malinowski.
I'm good. Thank you.
No questions. I have no questions either. So that being said, it looks like we have 2 motions to be made. Mr. Healy, do you have your motion voice ready?
Do I have to read the whole thing?
I think if you just say as provided,
I'll
with
figure
the
out a way.
caveat of the date, I think.
So this is for Woodward. Is that, Greg, what you need?
Correct.
Okay. I move that the select board adopt the resolution in language provided by the superintendent of schools relating to the Woodward Southborough Board of Selectmen vote language as contained in our packet.
Can we
Second,
just add, Betty, with the meeting date of 3/1/22? It's a blank. So I just,
Okay.
okay.
second, as amended.
All right. Any discussion? I see none. All right, Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Thank you. And then the second, Mr. Healy, for Finn, we need to do both.
All right, I got to take another deep breath. I move that the select board adopt the resolution for provided for Finn Southborough Board of Selectmen, select board, vote language. In the language contained in our packet as provided by the superintendent of school, with the addition that the vote is taking place at our open meeting on March 1, 2022.
Second.
All right, roll call. Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio is aye. Thank you. Marty, we're going to miss you making the motions. I'm telling you, I appreciate it.
I'll record them before your meetings after May and leave them in a box for you.
Well, that would be great. All right, Superintendent. So that is one thing that's set. So that leaves us just the two warrant articles that you have for the article. Let's see, Article 17, which is the. Let me pull it up really quick here. I believe it is for the feasibility study. Would you like to update the board on that?
Sure. So the warrant article is for the amount of $950,000. And it's really, it's for, if we are, excuse me, if we are invited into, Becky, can you take this?
Sure. So if we are invited into the eligibility phase with MSBA, part of that process will involve conducting a feasibility study. We have had conversations with an architectural firm who has been able to provide us with some similar costs for feasibility studies with communities that are similar in size to ours, with projects that were similar in size. And it was their recommendation that we do request the $950,000 for the feasibility study.
Wonderful. Thank you. Questions, comments? Mr. Stivers,
I'm all set, thanks.
Mr. Dennington,
No questions.
Ms. Malinowski,
No questions.
Mr. Healy.
Yeah, this is one of those bonding things that I have to recuse on, so
Okay.
nothing for
Yep.
me.
That's fine. And I have no questions either, but we just wanted the opportunity to go over them while we had you here. And the last article is, you had talked to us a little bit about it, but just for those people that may be tuning into this meeting, Superintendent, it was Article now 31, which is for the stabilization fund. If you just take a minute or two, or if you want Rebecca to do it, just take a
Right.
minute or two and talk about this for anybody that new may be tuning in tonight.
Sure. So I'm going to try to avoid a coughing attack and have Becky take this one.
Greg, I have some water. Do you want some?
That would be impressive.
What I do have, I have a presentation. I don't know if the board wants to see the entire presentation on the capital stabilization fund. But what I can explain to you is that as a regional school district, we are permitted under Mass General Law to establish a capital stabilization fund, similar to how the town has established one. And so what this fund would allow us to do is we could budget each year for capital projects in our operational budget. And that would allow us to really be mindful about projects that we do have coming up at the Algonquin campus. And we would be able to budget for it and thereby eliminate any borrowing that may be needed by being able to pay cash for some of our smaller projects. For example, the water heater, which is something that we are working with both towns on this year. The only way that we can fund this capital stabilization fund is through the operational budget. Or if we ever wanted to utilize E&D, we would have to go through the Department of Revenue to approve that transfer. And then also if let's say we were in a shortfall one year and we required to utilize funds from the capital stabilization fund for maybe some of our maintenance issues. Again, we would have to go to the Department of Revenue for their permission to utilize funds from this. So it really is regulated in terms of the amount of money and how the money can be spent.
All right, we'll just kind of go roundtable. Mr. Dennington, any questions, comments?
Sure. So I don't think the language of it is it in our the draft warrant right now? You said article 30.
Sorry,
What
Andrew.
did you say?
31.
Okay,
31.
Okay.
Yep. Do you have the warrant, Andrew? Do you want me to?
Yeah,
read
I got it.
what
I
says?
got it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so is this to set up something for the next fiscal year? It's not, okay.
Right.
And then the level at which you would fund this stabilization fund is something that would be determined as part of the operational budget on a year-to-year basis.
That is correct. So there are limitations in terms of the amount that we can include in the budget. It would be, just trying to get those numbers here. It may not exceed 5% of the aggregate amount assessed to the member towns in the preceding fiscal year. So we are limited in terms of what we could add. However, if we had a larger project, we could again petition to the Department of Revenue to allow us to budget a larger amount.
Okay. And so doing this might relieve some of the smaller capital expenditures you see here on a year-to-year basis.
Correct.
Leveling it with the funding. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Thanks, Becky, for the explanation. Are there a large amount of deferred items because Southborough hasn't set up this account yet?
So we do have the list of items that have been deferred. Some of them include the hot water, the redundant hot water tank that we are proceeding with this year. We have some outdoor walkway repairs that are needed, some lighting control software and hardware repairs, some eyewash infrastructure in some of our science classrooms that do require repair. And then weatherproofing around the building, like preventative maintenance, caulking, and trim repair. So there have been things that have been deferred.
Okay, thank you. I'm good with this.
Mr. Healy.
So I guess a couple of things. One, first, an observation. I think stabilization funds are a good idea. There are folks in Southborough who feel very strongly to the contrary. So just to give you a heads up on that. I mean, in theory anyway, a town stabilization fund is, you build up an amount of money so that it can somewhat modulate the tax rate over, if you have a good year, you put more money into the stabilization fund. If you have a bad year, you take more money out of the stabilization fund to sort of, again, modulate the tax rate. Now, it sounds like from what I've heard that the reason for this is more to maybe fund smaller capital projects, because again, you're not impacting the tax rate. So is that the kernel of the idea behind this?
Yes, because it would allow us to, let's say 5 years from now, we have a project that we know we want to embark on. It would allow us to budget for that project over those 5 years. So it would be a smaller impact to the towns. And then we would be able to accomplish that project. The other thing is if we were to identify a project and go out for bid for that, and then it came in at a lower amount, the funds that were in that account or where that were specified for that project would be able to remain in the account, even if it came in under budget. So it would give us some flexibility in terms of some of the projects that are needed at the high school.
Right, you anticipated my next question, which was, how does money get into this fund? I'm assuming one way is that there could be a specific authorization in a budget year that X amount of money is going into the stabilization fund. Am I correct about that?
Correct. We would,
Okay.
that would be included in the budget, and it would be appropriated to the two communities based on the, since it's a capital project, it would be based on the capital appropriation.
Now, secondly, it sounds like you just described a second way that money could get into the fund, and that is if there's money targeted for a capital expenditure and not all of the money needs to be used, it doesn't resort to the general fund or otherwise, it can be directed into the stabilization fund.
So once in the stabilization fund, it remains in the stabilization fund. So if we have money in that stabilization fund and the school committee has decided to, do a project, and that if that project comes in less than budget, then the money will just stay in the capital stabilization fund. It will not revert back to the operational budget or to E&D.
Okay, and I guess my final question then, is there any other way besides a direct allocation from the towns of Northborough and Southborough, or reverting money that was already in the stabilization fund? Is there any other way for money to get into the stabilization fund? For instance, there are a number of line items that in a particular budget year don't hit their cap. Can that money be reverted into the stabilization fund?
So the only way, really the main way that money would go into that stabilization fund is through the operational budget, is through the budgeting. Once that operational budget has been approved, there are only two ways that the assessment could be increased, and that would be through the use of excess and deficiency funds, which is what the regional school district would already have on hand. Or it can be through an additional assessment to the member towns, but that would mean an amended budget, which would mean that we would have to go back to the towns for the approval.
Okay. Again, conceptually, I don't have a problem with it. It sounds like something that I would, presumably this is not something you all would do, but that higher operational budgets become a stream into a stabilization fund. But obviously that's something that source of funding is something that at least I would be inclined to watch closely. But as I said, there are folks in Southborough who are less fans of stabilization funds than I am. So I'm all set.
Thank you, Marty. Mr. Desmond, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here. Going back to the question about, are there items, do we have a list of items that need funding? Yes, we do. And a number of them have been on the list for some number of years. And I think it's important to consider the age of the building. I mean, it's coming up on 20 years now that we've had the renovation at the high school. And, as we've seen, things like caulking wear out. And so it's just, the list is going to get bigger. So I think the timing is important to consider here. And it's, we've been funding a lot of these things out of revolving funds in the operational budget, and that's just not sustainable as the building ages. Thank you.
All right, Mr.
Thank you. I think this is a useful management tool, and as Marty commented, there's been a lot of conversation about stabilization funds generally, and I think there's always theoretically some danger that it gets too big or somehow gets off track in some ways, but I don't think there's much risk of that here, and I think, again, it's useful for management purposes, and so I'm certainly supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Mr. Dennington.
No, I think I already asked a question before, so I think I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, superintendent, staff, and Roger, Kim, Paul, thank you so much for coming tonight. I think these conversations are good. They're useful. They'll help us also when we meet with advisory on the 22nd, that we'll have the answers to some of these questions as we go in. So again, thank you so much for coming tonight. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having us, and we also greatly appreciate you moving us up from the consent agenda. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Good night.
All right. Next up is annual town meeting overview of logistics. I am going to ask Chelsea to touch on this? I know she's received phone calls. I've received some phone calls.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So I've received a few emails and some questions around the logistics of town meeting. I think it's important for the residents to know that by choosing to have this at Algonquin and go back to a weeknight, it just provided the most flexibility for us as we're continuing to navigate the safest way to host town meeting. And I think we've gotten some good suggestions on the best way to help residents get there, et cetera. So I think there's still some things that can be vetted. And I think I would ask Ms. Braccio to just leave this on the agenda every meeting so that we can provide residents updates as we get them. But I just think, just to reinforce that, having an Algonquin, we are allowed to do that based on the voted to fall town meeting, and that it just gives us more flexibility. So more to come, I think, as we get through the details and some of the logistics.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea. I think it's a great idea to certainly leave it on here. And I think we're going to hear a lot more as we move closer to town meeting as well. I don't know. I'm not going to go round table. If somebody wants to add something, please unmute and feel free. Otherwise, we'll just move on to the next. All right. Thank you, Chelsea, for doing that, by the way. Next up is an update on the warrant articles. So I just wanted to briefly go through with the board. I know we're meeting with advisory on the 22nd. So I just wanted to touch on a few articles and just update the board on the dates that we plan on discussing them. Article 24 is a CPA article for Mooney pickleball and tennis. That's scheduled. We're inviting them to come in on 3/15. Article 25 is the clerk's operating regulations. We'll invite Jim on for 3:15 as well, just to touch on that and give the board information. The board, Article 26, tree bylaw, had some discussion with planning board. I think there's more discussion going to be involved on that. So that is for 3:15 as well. The Trails Committee, Article 27, is already presented to this board. I don't think we need to have them come back in and talk any more about their warrant article. If somebody jump in, if I'm going too fast here, I'm just trying to get through it. Andrew, can you go ahead, Marty? Go ahead.
Lisa, the only thing I'll point out is that Catherine McKee is and I'm just wondering if she is there because of a possible discussion about this warrant article from Trails.
Well, we can certainly bring her over, Marty, and if there's anything she'd like to add, I don't necessarily know that we have any questions for her, but certainly if we could bring her over.
Maybe she just finds our meetings absolutely fascinating.
Maybe she has nothing better to do on a Tuesday night. You're right.
She doesn't have her hand up, so I think maybe we're good. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Andrew, Article 28 is the rules and regulations. Do you want to just, I can put it on for 3:15, or do you want to just touch on, it's not that big of an article. Do you want to just take a few minutes, and for anybody that may be watching tonight, just to have kind of a gist of what it is that you're looking to do?
Sure, although is it really Article 28?
In my draft, I thought it was, maybe it changed. Hold on, maybe from the two drafts that I went through. I was going through two different drafts.
Okay, it's Article 29. It's Article 29.
29, okay. I stand corrected.
Summarized pretty quickly.
Okay, go right ahead.
There are some town boards, committees and commissions that have authority to issue rules and regulations that implement the mission they have in their bylaws. What this would do is require any board that is before it issues rules and regulations to hold a public hearing on them and include a copy of the proposed rules and regulations in the hearing notice at least 14 days before. And the purpose of this is to have this to be a transparent, reliable process. This is how this works at the state level. It's how it works at the federal level. We consulted with town council about how you handle this at the municipal level. There's really no state law that says you have to do it in this way, but we felt that there was a consensus. We had a consensus that in the interest of fairness, avoiding surprise regulations that might be troublesome, that it was best to require any board, and would include the select board, to publish the proposed rules and regulations at least 2 weeks in advance of the meeting to consider adopting them. I guess the one substantive comment that I got back is actually from Mr. Litt. He had asked, I thought, a very good question. Should there be any proviso in here for emergency rules and regulations? If some board needed to adopt something on an emergency basis, and then it would only be valid for X amount of time. I can't think of a scenario, well, other than maybe the Board of Health, where something like that might happen. And I have asked town council what he thinks about this, just haven't heard back yet. So that would be I would say 2 loose ends to tie up on this. One, circulating it to other boards that have rulemaking authority to see if they have any comment on this. And 2 would be hearing back from town council about his thoughts on Tim's idea.
Okay. Any questions for Andrew? I won't go round table because I don't know that if it's necessary. So I see none. Okay, Andrew, thank you. And I'm obviously off by an item number. So I guess Article 30 is the Capital Improvement and Planning Committee. Jason had come in and talked to us about that. So unless somebody wants them to come in again, it's already been presented and I don't have them scheduled. I see none. Okay, perfect. School stabilization, Article 31 has already been taken care of. Article 32 is we are going to have that on for 3:15. That has to do with CPA funding. And then Article 33 is a citizen's petition, and we will invite Mr. Weishan in on 3:15 if you'd like to come in and present that article. I have
Lisa,
Yeah,
sorry, can I just interrupt you on 32?
Yes,
Who's going to come in and talk about that? CPC or?
Shopsy. Shopsy's the one that asked for this, to be a placeholder for this
Okay.
article.
I think I'd like to request CPC's
Okay.
opinion on that.
Okay, we can certainly shoot it over and ask Marty, did you have something as well?
I was just going to say, hopefully they didn't do this on purpose, but I'm Shopsy's representative to the CPC, and there hasn't been a meeting because I keep telling Dorianne that at that meeting I will bring this up. They set the meeting for tonight, so CPC's meeting tonight. So I think it's a good idea to have them on the 15th as well.
Okay, perfect. We can certainly send that invitation out. Thank you both for that. That leads us to our still non-numbered articles at this point. The easement for St. Mark's Park. I'm going to put that on for the 15th so we can talk about who's going to work on presenting that article and start pulling things together for that. The noise bylaw is here tonight. They're up next. And the last is the scenic roads with planning board, and I think that's a future discussion on that. I don't know if it's going to be ready for the 15th. So we'll just keep in touch with planning board on that. So that's basically just an update on the warrant articles on where we're at. Which leads us to the fiscal year 23 budget update. Is Mr. Ballantyne? He is. If we could bring Mr. Ballantyne over. Hi, Brian. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I know that it necessarily wasn't on your schedule, but we appreciate you being here to answer any questions or comments that we may have based on the updated information that you had provided us, as well as I had received from Chief Achilles a note regarding an additional $5,446 for his contract and the new officer for the lieutenant. So Do you want to just touch on, Brian, briefly, anything that you put in your memo to us, and then we'll just open it up to everybody? And
Sure. Good evening first, but so not a ton has happened since our last meeting, but there has been a few significant things. We did amend or update the Assabet and regional assessments, so those are in there now. The money for the fire for what Ms. Braccio just mentioned is not in the numbers that you have right there. It's a minimal amount, but it's not in there yet. We'll probably put that in this week when the chief sends over his amended budget and update that too. We did tweak some very, very small things that funding for the ambulance fund. I just did that today based on maybe the ambulance borrowing. So it's about it's about $5,000 or $8,000 that's coming from the ambulance fund, but that doesn't affect the tax rate. So anyways, the bottom line is the tax rate right now is down to the estimated unshifted tax rate, 3.21 or thereabouts, and a little over 5.3 with the worst case shift. So it's actually getting down to at least a level we can talk about without cringing too much. But I know there's some talk about the opera money at some point in the evening, so that will obviously factor into the budget too. So for right now, we're holding with this, and when the CBAs, of course, are finished and approved, we'll obviously add that back into the estimates that I'm carrying also.
great, Brian, thank you. So also, I'm going to shift the ARPA discussion up because Brian, you had also mentioned some items for ARPA on your email as well. So I think we just tied this up. So I'm sure you don't want to hang around until potentially later in the meeting to get some answers. So we'll go around. Chelsea, you can start.
Sorry, can we go back to, I didn't see the memo on fire. And I'm looking at the budget from January 12th. And we had already increased for the contract, I thought. So Brian, can you say again what the request was for?
Yeah, it was for the chief's contract and for the promotion, the recent promotion, I believe, the lieutenant's promotion, adjustments for those two items. I haven't seen any detailed information on that, by the way, so I can't comment on what comprises that. I just had a high-level email about it. That's it.
Okay, when you get it, do you mind sending it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then just a few comments. In terms of the your memo, I think that last meeting we agreed that 50,000 Board of Health's request would come out of ARPA. So, but I think that's still in the Board of Health budget.
Yes.
So can we?
That is correct.
Can we add that item to your budget memo or wherever you're tracking your ARPA list? And I'm not sure when the appropriate time would be to actually take it out of the budget if you're going to use ARPA, but that was one thing. And the other thing is you have a bullet point on the new building hours and the conservation department. So the conservation hours, from my understanding, are going to be shared with the ZBA position. So I'd like to see the that allocation actually broken out between conservation and ZBA. And I know ZBA hasn't, I don't know exactly what that split should look like, but I'd like to see those actual hours in those budgets. And in terms of your, and Lisa, are you okay if I talk about the suggestions that finance made. Okay, so in terms of your suggestions about the Breakneck Hill, the ADA, and the DPW truck, I would be in favor of the Breakneck Hill remediation and the ADA. I'm not certain on the DPW truck. I think it's an okay suggestion, but I think the other two make a lot of sense to be one-time things, and then adding in the Board of Health amount would be about 50,000 less than what you were suggesting. And Lisa, do you want to talk about the ARPA memo here, or and kind of my thought process on why I agree with the finance committees? Or do you want everybody else to kind of just respond to Brian first?
Yeah, I'll let everyone else respond,
Okay.
because there may be budget related questions, and then we'll open the door back up and we'll come back around Chelsea for ARPA.
Okay,
Mr. Haley.
okay,
No, I'm
Oh, did
good.
you have more budget? Sorry, Chelsea.
I did.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
Sorry, Marty.
no.
I'm going to put you on hold again. Sorry.
Sorry. So I think, some of the other questions that I have are in terms of do we have any a better idea of the revolving 9/11 revolving account and the amount that we would be able to transfer over into for FY23? That's one question, to offset the bond payment.
Yes, they've supported, the commission has supported $40,000, which is a fair chunk. It may leave a little bit in at the end of the year. However, it'll give them funding for any maintenance. And the thought process is, because it's such an odd year, or it's been a few odd years, right? And so they are open to increasing that. They just don't want to, they don't want to go too far for this year. So I think it's a fair suggestion, I think. So.
And you have that 40,000 in your calculation?
I do. So we cannot just as an aside, we cannot transfer money out of the revolving to offset the budget. We have to do it by paying the debt directly from the revolving fund. It's a little strange. So I lowered the debt budget and by that 40,000 to account for it.
And that's not historically what we've done, right? But that's some guidance that Carl has gotten from Department of Revenue.
Yeah, Department of Revenue toyed around with it and then finally told us that no, that's not really a good way of doing it.
So then are you essentially having to split your payment between the general fund, because the debt payment is more than 40,000 this year, right?
Correct. So we have split it between the two, right? Correct.
Okay. And then I think I still have some questions on individual budgets. And Lisa, I don't know if we as a board are going to go through those individual, if we're going to go one by one in the budgets, not tonight, but at our next meeting prior to meeting with advisory. And so then I think I have some specific questions about individual department budgets.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Mr. Haley.
Yeah, I don't have any real questions on the materials that Brian presented. I guess my and it intersects with the ARPA stuff, and that is I think I'm consistent on this. I'm not as wedded to the notion that it has to be a one-term expenditure. I just think that if we're going to cross the Rubicon, decide that we're going to take a certain amount of ARPA money to provide tax relief this year, money's fungible, and it doesn't matter what it's used for. I understand there might be disagreement on that, but that's where I am. So.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. Got a couple of things. One, Brian, I'm assuming that the updated MWRA water assessment figures are now incorporated in all of this. We had a lowering of the expected cost from them for FY23, and so that's in there now.
Yeah, the amended water budget. Yes.
Amended water funds. Okay, good. Yeah. And it's my recollection that last time I did the math that it's about $400,000 reduction in the budget for each percentage increase in the tax rate. So if we cut the budget by about 400K, the tax rate comes down by about 1%. Is that still ballpark accurate?
That's a good rule of thumb, yes.
Okay, thanks. And following on Mr. Healy's comment, I also am not particularly concerned about the one-time piece, at least judiciously applied for the ARPA money. So I would be in favor, for example, of the DPW vehicle for ARPA or other things that maybe are not pure one-time expenses, but again, need to apply that judiciously, but I'm certainly not committed to only firm, clear, absolute one-time expenditures there. So that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Mr. Dennington.
I would like to keep ARPA more for one-time expenditures. Although, I'm on board with using some of the ARPA money to kind of bridge some of the increases for the Board of Health, and particularly if that's not, I understand what's that, like $50,000, but if that's not reflected in the numbers here, I mean, one observation I have is the total expenditures, they're going to go down after you would apply some of the ARPA money to the Board of Health. It's 1.4% year-over-year increase, which overall is not a particularly high number. So it looks like a lot of progress has been made. Looks like it's getting to be in pretty good shape. I guess I don't have that much of I guess I can support using some of the ARPA money for the DPW truck and the ADA improvements, because I think of the ADA improvement as like a long-term thing that we need to do. Although I still would like to, save as much of that ARPA money as possible so that the committee can think more big picture about, are there other bigger capital items that we might be able to, wish list items that we could use ARPA money for.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So I as well would prefer that they stick to more one-time, whether it be capital or other items. I guess this is a good time to bring up the ARPA committee did submit, it was in our packet, some recommendations. They recommended dedicating $500,000 to tax relief. They gave a suggestion of $400,000 applied to the roads budget and $100,000 applied to other projects, with the target of limiting the tax rate increase to less than 5% for fiscal year 23. They would like to request $400 to $800 for a direct mail campaign so they could promote for public input. I think that's the easiest piece in my mind of what they're looking to do. I think that's a no-brainer. I'm hoping the board would be in support of spending up to $800 to get public input and notify the public of the forums and whatnot. I'm not seeing anybody shaking their head no. So, okay, we'll let them know that piece is good. So as far as the other piece, I think it's kind of in line with what we're talking about. I think I'm supportive, obviously, of the Board of Health. That's going to lower the budget. The Breakneck Hill remediation, the ADA improvements make sense. I'm on the fence on the truck. But I think we need to find other ways, and I don't know what the answer to that is. I guess that's why there's 5 great minds sitting here of, what is the best way that we could make some impact in the tax rate. And another thing to think about is kind of looking ahead at some of the capital as well. I mean, we still have the senior center that has been very actively pitching to this board that they would like to be able to move forward. If NERI plans go forward, it's 3 to 5 years away. They've waited a long time, and they would like this board to consider something sooner rather than later. Not saying it has to be tonight, but it's just something else for us to consider. So based on the recommendation of the 500,000, Chelsea, do you have any specific thoughts on where, short of the Breakneck Hill, ADA, and Board of Health, you might like to see that used?
Yeah, so in the email that ARPA sent over, it was to get the tax rate below 5%. And I think we're already below 5% before we take Brian's suggestions. So, I think a lot's changed in the last, 10 days with the budget. So I think they were, it almost seems like they don't have all the information that they need to in order to make a recommendation. So one of my concerns with the recommendation, regardless of the percentage, is they want to put it towards roads. Well, we do 400,000 in roads every year. So if you do that, you're going to essentially decrease this year's tax rate by 1% to then have to increase it to catch up next year. And I just don't think that that's a good financial decision. And I get Marty's point on, doesn't really matter what you apply it to. Well, I agree with that if the 400,000 isn't one time somewhere else, or is one time somewhere else, right? Like, I don't really, just as long as the numbers add up, I don't really care what you say you apply it to. But the 400, we have a low capital year. If you look at the capital plan, whether it's, between 3 and 3.5 million next year or whatever it is, like, this is probably the lowest capital year that we've seen in 5 years and looking out 5 years. So, that's where you have your fluctuations of your tax rate. And, we just got presented with an article for a NERI feasibility study for $950,000. Now I understand that that's going to be bonded over, Brian, keep me honest, a 10-year period. But, I think we have a lot of larger capital things coming up, and I would hate to use it towards roads unless we get a plan from Karen that says, if we increase our road maintenance by 400,000 this year, which I know is not going to help the tax rate, but if we are getting economies of scale and we can repair roads earlier, and we're going to get a better price because we're going to have a larger bid, then I'd be in favor of doing something like that. But I just think it's short-sighted to apply a $500,000 number on a low capital year without fast tracking something that we know is coming up in the next 2 years. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer, but I feel very strongly about it.
So can I just follow up on Chelsea's comment, only because I think she makes a valid point. And one of my concerns is we've already thrown, that free cash against the budget, which I totally understand and agree with. But I do feel on a scale of $500,000 thrown against the budget, you can call it roads or whatever you want to call it, not a good idea. I think we're exposed at that point for FY24 to have a significant problem. We're doing a 5-year model right now. It's sort of a dirty model on the capital and what we know with debt. And FY24 and FY27 are clearly the 2 years that look to be challenging years. And going in $1 million of one-time money this year, next year is just going to be, we're just really, really exposing ourselves to a lot of risk. So personally, I'm not in favor on something on that scale. But, when you're talking the ADA and the other smaller items, I think that's fine. But we're going into some really scary territory, I think. But that's just my 2 cents.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Marty?
I agree with everything Chelsea and Brian said. I just, my mind thinks about it differently. And I'm a bit of a broken record on this. The way I have viewed ARPA all along is that 3 close to equal buckets are the way to deal with it conceptually. One bucket is for tax relief, but not tax relief simply in fiscal year 23. And so the initial decision is, how much tax relief do we want to give in fiscal year 23? Now, we've had some good work, some good breaks on what the tax rate right now appears to look like. And so even I came in and I was thinking about, $1 million pot on the tax relief ARPA money, divide it in 3. I'm not even sure if we need to hit, $333,000 this year of tax relief. We might be able to get away with a reasonable tax number by devoting $250,000, for instance. That again, and that would have a couple of benefits. Number one, that'd leave $750,000. If conceptually we're thinking about it this way, $750,000 for potential tax relief in subsequent years. I think, Brian, I hope that would address some of your concerns that we got to be careful about, robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I think if we can shrink that ARPA number this year and do it in a reasonable way that still comes up with a reasonable tax rate, that gives us flexibility in the next couple of years. The two additional buckets I have in mind are, number one, capital items. And Chelsea, you're absolutely right. This is a low capital year, but we don't have to spend the money this year. Conceptually think about $1 million or so for capital projects that clearly are coming and that we can target. And the final one, now I'm going to address it, Andrew, is that another $1 million or so for something that the town needs, but maybe not urgently, wants, maybe urgently, and that otherwise, without a $3 million infusion of money, chopping $1 million of it out, we wouldn't do for 5 years or 10 years. We've got the opportunity to do it now. That is the way I thought about ARPA from the beginning. That's still the way I think about ARPA. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, Sam.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with Marty's concept in terms of 3 buckets. I'm not sure I'm on board in terms of the actual numbers there. I mean, it seems to me that my target tax rate with a 12% shift number that we've been talking about is somewhere between 4.5% and 5%. And I don't think we need a lot of tax relief out of ARPA to actually hit that number now, it looks to me. And I'm fine with keeping sort of our powder dry on that a little bit to understand what might happen in 24, 25 with some of that money. But I'm also inclined to move forward with some of the short-term recommendations as Brian and Chelsea have talked about, and also to get the senior center thing fast-tracked in terms of the longer we wait on that, the less it's valuable is if we do the Woodward transition. You want to use that new space as long as you can. And I don't think it makes a lot of sense to wait until the Assabet folks can schedule it, et cetera, if we can get that moving quickly. So I'd be inclined to spend some money on that near term. And the other issue for me is I continue to be interested in Andrew's theory on let's find a big ticket item out there somewhere. And I'd really like to see more of what that might be. I have some thoughts about that, but I'm looking to the ARPA committee to come up with some suggestions for what we might think about there. It wouldn't bother me too much if we wound up spending more than a third of Marty's bucket on something like that if it was a really compelling idea. So I think we've got some flexibility to do that because I don't think we're going to need as much for tax relief this year because of some good work, good fortune on that near term here. So I don't think we have to make that decision today, but I think we do have to make some calls on some of the near term projects, which I think make a lot of sense. So that's sort of where I am. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Andrew.
I just have Chelsea, I agreed with a lot of what you said. I just have a follow-up question about what you said about how this year is a light capital year. And then just looking at the rev cap in the packet, the line item for capital articles, at least FY22 was 707,000, then FY22 900,000, then this year it's like 1.1 million. So am I reading that wrong? That's kind of suggesting this is a higher year for capital articles.
Andrew,
Okay, so I guess.
Okay, go ahead, Chelsea. I was going to jump in. Go ahead. No, go ahead. We're on the same page. So go ahead.
So I guess if you look at FY24, 25, 26, and 27, it's at least 700,000 less than all of those years. At least these aren't like
700,000? Wow.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it could be significantly more. I mean, but like Corderville Hall is included for next year. So if we decide to take Corderville Hall out, then, so obviously we're not going to, my guess is all that's, and Brian, keep me honest here. My guess is all of the things that are on the capital plan over the next 5 years are not going to be brought forward, and some could potentially be bonded. But this is a light capital year. And I do think that we last year we had the private schools came through and paid for some of our capital too. I think if we can get them on board now too, that would be helpful, and bring the tax rate down even further. So sorry, Lisa, I don't know if you had something else to add.
That's where I was going, Chelsea. So that's fine.
Okay. And we also don't have the NERI numbers in here yet either. So depending on how that goes. Now that won't impact.
Maybe state funding, right?
I'm sorry.
A lot of that may be state funding. Or you're talking about the NERI,
The article we just talked about. So that won't be for FY23, except for maybe some interest, but starting in FY24, that would be part of a bond. So, I think there's a lot of moving parts, but I think in general, it's fair to say that this is a low year, and I think you kind of have to take the COVID years out.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So I guess where I'm at is I'm kind of a mix of the two. I like your buckets, Marty. I think that's a great starting point and a way to think about things. I completely support the Breakneck Hill, the ADA. I was kind of on the fence on the DPW truck, but I could talk about that one. But I do think as well that the senior center is an opportunity that they've waited a really long time. And I think it just makes sense to, if we can move forward with this, I think it's the way to go. So in looking at tax relief to some level, trying to keep it around the $250,000 number that we kind of have talked about, I think Brian had put forth, including the truck, was $204,000, and with the Board of Health, the other $50,000. That is $250,000 in relief from the tax rate. Correct, Brian? I'm reading that. I'm reading that right. Okay, I just want to make sure. I'll use Chelsea's thing, keeping me honest here. So, I think we're doing that. We're fulfilling lowering the tax rate a little bit with this. But I also think taking care of the senior center just makes sense now. It's taking it off the capital next year. So ultimately, there's a little bit of relief next year as well. So I guess my question to everybody is, and again, we can discuss this further, but kind of as we move forward, is everybody on board with the Breakneck Hill remediation coming out of ARPA? Okay, that's a given. Okay. The ADA improvements, I think that one's kind of a no-brainer as well. DPW truck, I'm not necessarily there. Chelsea's a no, Sam's a yes.
So
Andrew doesn't.
Can I just
Go ahead, Brian.
No, the theory behind that's kind of like a tepid recommendation. We had heard some other communities that are looking at those large truck purchases as sort of a non-recurring, even though they're recurring, they're recurring every 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. So they're kind of looking at it that way. And we kind of thought, maybe not. And we kind of, throw it to the board and see what the board thinks. So I just wanted to mention that. That's all.
All right. That one seems a little tepid. Andrew's kind of like,
yeah.
So we can hold off on that one. We can have more discussion on that. And then where does everybody think about the senior center?
But can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Andrew. Sure. Questions are good.
The senior center as FY24, FY23 is
23.
Is where you want to use ARPA money for the senior center for fiscal year
20.
How much? Is there?
It's the number I've heard is between 300 and 350 and 4. We don't have a firm number. We can get that. I'm just trying to get an idea if people are willing to entertain, using ARPA for that. We can get a firm number, I believe. John, go ahead, Marty.
That would fit into my second bucket. That's the sort of thing that would fit into my second bucket. Something that the town clearly is going to do, needs to do, wants to do, and this is a way to get it done without a hit on the tax rate.
We can still leave it out there. Obviously, we're not making any core decisions tonight, other than Brian. I think that you could take the Breakneck Hill, the ADA, and the Board of Health as, that's concrete. We can still leave the truck, and we can think about the senior center. We've generally talked about it a little bit. we don't have to make a decision on that tonight, Andrew, but sooner
Okay.
rather than later, I think.
No,
We-
I'm warm to the idea. I just want to understand a little bit more, because anytime there's something that was discussed 2 budget cycles ago and then we skipped it, I don't remember it as well. So
You know what? We can
I just
certainly
need a
have,
refresher on, and now particularly in light of where this is headed with Woodward, right?
Mhm.
Just want some thinking around what is the right balance of. I think where you're going with this is it's like a bridge, okay? I agree the condition of Corderville Hall is not good, but I remember a big issue that came up before has to do with you increase the assessed value of the property X, then you have to make everything ADA compliant. I thought that's kind of one of the things that we were trying to.
we're
happen.
under that number.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding is that we're under that number, Andrew. I mean, obviously, everybody's assessments have gone way up on buildings and everything else, but we had that window. So what I'll do is I'll have John Parent come in and he can talk to us about it on the 15th, and, obviously sooner rather than later with the bid cycle and, everything and all the federal money that's going to be coming out too,
So this would
we'll
not
put
be
it on.
using the Alphabet folks, or would be?
No,
Okay.
according to John, the savings over time in waiting for Assabet with the costs and everything rising, he has his whole analysis. I don't want to
Okay.
speak for him. I know, Sam, you've heard his pitch on this as well. So we can certainly bring John in and we can kind of let it go at that. So, all right, I think we've made progress. Brian, you have a little bit of headway. We'll send on, yes, Chelsea, sorry.
Sorry. So I think, and I don't know how recent Capitals met about this, but it probably makes sense to have Capital and John come in on it and just touch base with Council on Aging.
Yep.
Too, so that they know. And then I think it probably makes sense for us to explain to the ARPA committee kind of where we started tonight in terms of the budget discussion and, obviously they were looking to provide some tax relief to the residents, which I think was the right direction. And I just think so many things had changed between, our meeting 2 weeks ago that I just want to make sure that they understand kind of what transpired and, our concerns about, or at least my concerns about the just taking the road money.
We'll make sure that they get an update, Chelsea. No problem.
Okay.
Not that you're offering to draft something, but just
I'm
kidding.
happy to. if you guys
There
want me
you
to.
go. Hey, there you go. If you wouldn't mind, Chelsea, that's fine. Mr. Healy.
Just an observation, and it follows a little bit on our discussion with the folks from the schools. The way we're talking about dealing with some pot of money from ARPA is kind of the way a stabilization fund works. And it can have significant benefits for a town to ease tax years like this. So.
No, very, very good point, Marty. Thank you. So,
And Lisa, I think as Brian kind of fine tunes his 5-year plan, I think that'd be helpful for ARPA to see so they can understand what we're talking about with, the trends, because I don't think they probably have that information to understand that this is a low capital year and, kind of looking at what the few, what that would do long-term to just plug the 500. So I just want to make sure that, they understand those.
Lisa?
No. Yes, Sam, go right ahead.
Quick suggestion, if we suggest to the ARPA committee that they watch this meeting from time X to time Y to pick up this conversation, that would be a quick way for them to get updated.
Yeah, we can do it. And I also want to say, we put ARPA together. We threw a bunch of great new volunteers together as well. And I think even for what they've come up with shows that they've put a lot of time and effort into it. So if ARPA is going to take away anything from this discussion is we appreciate the path they've gone down and we heard them. We heard what they were looking for. And again, we appreciate all the hard work, but their job isn't over yet. So, okay. That being said, can we bring over our noise bylaw committee? I will apologize to them for keeping, for it being 9 o'clock before we get to bring them over. And we do have a hand raised. Oh, now it's gone. Okay. Mr. Goodney, welcome. Mr. Fling. I apologize for the lateness. It was certainly not intentional by any means. So we very much appreciate. Let me just take a look and see if any of your other members, sorry.
I did post it as a joint meeting, so.
No, we'll have you come. What is your quorum? Is it three? 3 or 4?
Well, we have 6 members right now, so.
It'd be 4.
4.
Mr.
Okay.
Mello is out there too.
Mr. Mello, we need to bring over. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. So I don't think you have a quorum. We'll keep an eye out just to see if anybody else comes through. And we could certainly have you call your meeting to order then.
And if we do have a quorum, 9:01, we'll call it to order. We'll use your scribe. So in preparation of the meeting, we sent over a short PowerPoint with pretty much everything that you guys should know. And we also sent over a draft that I hope everybody reviewed. In the interest of time and being quick, I just kind of like maybe some feedback, unless you want me to go through everything, which I don't think at this late hour you'd want me to do. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at it. So what's your preference? Do you want me to go through everything?
I'm looking to the board. I wouldn't mind hearing what you have to say, but I'll certainly leave it up to the board. I looked through it, but you guys have put a lot of time and energy in it. And, you know, I would appreciate hearing what you have to say. Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And you guys have done terrific work. Maybe in a bridged version, because we do have the,
Yeah.
maybe fly through the PowerPoint a little quicker than you otherwise might have.
Yeah, I know we've done a number of, forums and it is a complicated document. And the whole idea of it was, once you first get into it, you think it's going to be something simple, but then once you start to listen to some people's problems and some of the different circumstances that happen in the town, it does become much more complicated than you would initially have thought. Tim, can you just bring up the PowerPoint just quickly, and I'll just, snap right through those. There's not much to it. Most of it. This is the PowerPoint that we put at the public forum. So we have, why don't we start the first one? So obviously the title page, keep going. So these are the committee members, you know that. And the charge, just so the public doesn't, that's the charge. And we've followed that to a T. Go ahead. 4.
So this is
and go ahead to 5. So the rationale is to ensure that there's free from excessive sound that may jeopardize the health and welfare of the citizens. Go ahead. So this is a brief overview of the survey that we came up with, 473 respondents, which we were very happy with. 50-50 split on whether we need a noise bylaw at all. And it looks like we need to take a straightforward minimalist approach was the kind of the highlights. Go ahead. So some of the top topics that people have brought up are leaf blowers, landscaping activities, vehicles and motorcycles, construction activity, trash pickup, delivery, and drop-offs. We did extensively go over decibel ratings, and it would be wonderful if you just had a device that you could just kind of hold out and go, okay, you're in violation, you're not in violation. But in reality, when you actually use it, I mean, some noises are more irritating than other noises. I did some experimentation with the meter actually myself and found that it was actually contrary to what you might think. I've also reached out to several of my partners in law enforcement in different areas that do have the meters, and they didn't express an over successful application for the meters. So I think it was more, we kind of geared our efforts more towards curbing certain activities rather than running around with a meter. So and also the police chief was consulted as well, and he did agree that he came from a department that the meters weren't very good, and he suggested that we do not go the meter route as well. So next slide. So some of the work we talked about, the prohibiting activities, we dealt with what we would call contracted work, which would be work that somebody gets paid to do. So we had to draw a line there about where we're gonna allow that, and then also we wanted to make it ability for homeowners to be able to work on their house. So we wanted to give maybe a little more hours to a homeowner to do work, because typically they might be doing that on a weekend. And we're also talking about outside exterior noise, and we're recently looking at business and industrial noise. We haven't quite finished that yet. We're kind of looking to maybe address some areas between what the planning board might outline and when they issue a permit, and areas that are kind of between that jurisdiction. We haven't quite ironed that out and voted on it perfectly yet, but we are looking at that particular avenue right now. Go ahead for the 10th. So we do have a list of some prohibitive activities that we've been exemptions that we've taken from suggestions through the survey, as well as looking at other town bylaws and so-called steal from them, plus prior attempts in drafts of bylaws for the town. We pretty much nailed down the violations. Penalties are pretty straightforward, and the enforcement is pretty straightforward, and a lot of the definitions are pretty straightforward in the document. The severability, we're still kind of waiting to hear back from the lawyers to see if we need that, and that's my understanding is if one of these parts of the bylaw was deemed to be unconstitutional, then the whole entire thing would be unconstitutional. But if we have this phrase in there, then just that one section would be unconstitutional. So the jury's still out on that. We're waiting to hear back from legal counsel. So question for the form. Okay, so in the form, we talked about construction noise standards and contracted work and the difference between those. So that's pretty much it without going through the actual hours. And all the document, I think, is probably what, 4.5 pages, Tim, by now?
Yeah, just under 4.
Yeah, just under 4, depending on the font. No, just under 4, and I think that kind of sums it up a little bit.
I'll jump in a little bit. We just had a public forum last week. We have feedback that we still need to incorporate into another update of a draft. We are meeting tomorrow and Friday actually to finalize as much as we can on the draft. And we're still kind of trying to figure out what's the date we need to work towards to make sure that we're meeting up with what the warrant articles need so everything can be published. So having that date would be of extreme use at this moment.
Yeah, that was the next thing on my agenda was what are we looking at for a schedule for a final draft? I mean, we are working overtime. We work sometimes 10:30 at night and on a Friday. So this week. So
I will tell you, I've watched most of your meetings. You guys have done a tremendous job in a very short period of time, and it's very appreciated. I think for a timeline is obviously you're working with council to review this. I think the goal is to have everything set by the end of March for a April. Vanessa, is that right? We're looking to go to print beginning of April.
Yeah, have the board potentially sign the warrant at the April 5th meeting, if not before.
Okay, so we would need to have everything towards the end of March. Can I just ask, you said you had a public forum the other day. What was the turnout that you had? Are you getting good turnout on your forums?
I think there was about 12 people, Tim, on that one.
Okay.
We maxed out around 14. So
yeah.
Okay, well,
And,
generally,
the responses are very passionate and, they're very heartfelt and they're all over, they're, on both sides of the fence. There's not a landslide one way or the other.
Yeah,
There's people that want more restriction and there's people that want less restriction.
we did get some good input on things to add that may have not been as strong as they
Correct, yeah.
were, like an escalation clause or some kind of ability to contest the fines or any kind of thing like that. So we had some good points that we can have previously that we do want to incorporate into something going forward. We also wanted to find out, if the board has any opinions about things that they've read that we should consider on our next meeting tomorrow before we continue to try to finalize something this week.
okay.
And we also, I guess we want to maybe go in front of advisory. That was not outlined in the charge, but I think that's probably not a bad idea if you folks are in agreement. So.
Yep, no, it certainly wouldn't hurt because we're meeting with advisory on the 22nd. Advisory was aware you were coming tonight, so they may have their questions ready for you when you come in. So it may be a little bit quicker. We've made them aware of who is coming into our meetings to try to streamline the process a little bit.
I mean, I guess I would like to do that with your recommendation is basically what I'm kind of looking for. Do you recommend that we go in front of advisory?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And do we know, Vanessa, where we stand with the review so far, the draft, the law review?
I do not, but I'll inquire first thing in the morning.
Okay. Okay. So we have a
Right.
schedule the end of March. You have to have everything hard by April 5th meeting. Is that correct?
Yep. And council, obviously, it would have to be council's comments and everything would have to be wrapped up as well during
Right.
that time frame. So I'm just going to go around quick to the board just to see if they have any questions or comments. Mr. Healy.
Yeah, I'm gonna zip through them quickly, get you guys out of here, and maybe sometime before midnight we'll get out of here. So a few things. Number one, I mean the language is important, and I'm looking. I've seen the draft language, but I mean just and Jay Talaman's great. So, but a couple of things. Number one, there are a number of instances in the proposed bylaw where most of the time it says things are prohibited. There are a couple of instances when it says things are allowed. And the problem with that is if you say, for instance, if you pass a bylaw that says, having your dog bark between, is allowed between 8 a.m. and noon. That doesn't mean that it's not allowed from afternoon and before 8. And so that, I mean, so I will just flag that sort of language is important. It seems logical, but saying something's allowed doesn't mean that the areas you left out means it's prohibited.
Right.
So most of the time you're pretty consistent saying things are prohibited or something shall happen, but there are a few instances where you say things are allowed. And I just think that's asking for trouble on the, whether or not it's enforceable. The penalty thing is interesting. I'm not a fan of rigid penalties. I'm a much bigger fan of that a hammer is there if necessary, but it's not a hammer that's required. Because I think one of the reasons this didn't pass, other than the uncertainty about decibel levels and things like that, is there really, and I share this concern, that you don't want to create a bylaw that is an invitation to civil war. Now, I understand there may be some civil wars going on in some neighborhoods. Fortunately, not my neighborhood, but I mean, I've watched some of your hearings, and clearly there's some issues out there with, I think, on both sides of it. Some folks who are over the top in terms of the noise levels that they generate on their property, and maybe some folks who are more sensitive than I am, for instance, about the noise levels that they can tolerate. And you don't want to create you want to create a bylaw that sort of smooths that down rather than creates more possibility for conflict. And I think having flexibility in what sort of penalties can be imposed for a first offense, second offense, et cetera, with a potential large hammer there is more effective than the rigidity of first is X, second is Y. Anyway, something to think about.
Yeah, we just pretty much use the what they do in most other laws and bylaws.
Yeah, and I'm sure an awful lot of, and I've watched, comes from things like that. I'm just telling you, I'm not a big fan of that, and I'm not how much thought went into it on their side about. They probably just pulled it over from some other. One bylaw started that way, and they all got sort of swooped in.
And there's always a chance of a verbal warning, which isn't really written down in there, but that's a common sense.
Honestly, you might put that in there.
It's actually
we did talk about that.
It's actually in there on line 104.
Okay, because Tim, I saw that you guys did a nice job with the discretion of what a police officer can do. If that specifically is addressed in there,
it's specifically in there. To one of your points, we are looking to add a specific line item for a warning for a first offense, so it has an actual better escalation clause and starting right with teeth.
And then the final thing, other than two final things, honestly, and I understand there's been a lot of discussion about it. The stuff that's in there about the other state statutes and the like, man, my recommendation is to get rid of it. If you want to reference that those things exist, that's fine. But the shorter, the cleaner, the simpler Southborough's noise bylaw is, without dragging in stuff that we don't need to add. I mean, that stuff is already the law. Pointing out, in a bracket at the bottom that these are other provisions that can be looked to is fine. But I think having the additional language, I think it confuses things. My view.
Well, the reason why we did put that in there, just for discussion, was people are going to experience noise, and they're going to look to the noise bylaw, and where it doesn't fit, they might look at the industrial noise section, and they want to be it's an educational section.
I get it.
It would guide them as to where to go and what to do. That's the only.
I get it, and I've seen the discussion on that. I'm not convinced by it. I put it in brackets at the bottom, and I take all of that language out. I think it's, again, and I deal with legal stuff every day. I think it's confusing to me to look at and go, why the hell is that in there? I don't think it's a big deal. Think about taking it out. And the final thing is, I'm not particularly woke, but one of the things that is in there is Sundays are treated differently. And I understand why Sundays are treated differently, but Sunday isn't Sunday for everybody. For some people, Saturday is Sunday, and for other people, Friday is Sunday. And I am assuming that some of it might have been reflex, some of it might have been from other bylaws or the like. But take a step back and think about whether or not there should be at least some flexibility on Sunday, because again, I'm assuming that with a blue law background or something like that there are that Sundays in certain areas are sacrosanct. But for honestly, a significantly increasing percentage of the population, Friday or Saturday is sacrosanct, and taking Sunday out when their worship or otherwise might be focused on Friday or Saturday. I'd have some flexibility on Sunday. So that's it for me.
Okay.
Thank you, Marty. Sam?
Thanks. And I've also followed most of the meetings of the committee. I think they've done a great job balancing a variety of, as Pete suggests, passionately held positions from both the public and the committee members. And I think they've wound up with a good structure here. I think it contains key elements that are necessary to make this thing work. And I continue to wonder about the noise meter. My experience with this has been that it is not widely well regarded, as Pete suggests out there. On the other hand, I had heard at one point that the AG was inclined to approve bylaws that included some specific measurement, and I'm hoping town council can clarify that if we need to include something like that to get AG approval. It would be very helpful to know that as soon as possible. If it's not required to get AG approval, I think that the flexibility in the current draft is not a bad way to start, at least, and we'll see how it works. So again, I don't look to any substantially missing components here. Again, I think that it's useful to move this forward and see what town meeting has to say about it. I think there's interesting survey result, not overwhelming desire that we need it. On the other hand, there's a lot of folks who are very concerned about this, and I've gotten over the years a number of calls from people asking for this. So there's clearly a momentum out there to push forward on it. So let town meeting decide. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Mr.
Thanks,
Dennington.
Sam. I thought you guys did a great job. It looks like I read it and it made a lot of sense to me. It looks like it kind of codifies some basic common sense standards, that things that I think of are just kind of basic, courtesy that you should do towards your neighbors, and really just codifying it. To some of Marty's points, I have a little different take on it. I think the Sunday distinction, how I read it, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it's the only significance to the Sunday versus another day was that contracted work is not allowed on Sunday. You can still do homeowner work on Sunday. I think there might have been slightly different hours there. I think Marty did make a good point about, instead of saying contracted work shall be allowed on Sundays, you could, there you said shall not be allowed on Sundays, but yeah, just to make it consistent where you say allowed versus prohibited. I think you're going in the right direction of having, a first offense be just a warning. On line 160, it said any person who violates this chapter, if convicted, and I think of conviction as a criminal word. So I think you probably want to have a different word, and J is probably going to help with that. It's more of a civil infraction. Yeah, and I think that, again, maybe Marty has some thoughts on this. I thought that pretty much any mechanism where you can get a ticket for anything, there's always some type of an appeal mechanism. There's something like that for building code violations. Maybe that's what you model it after, but I'm sure Jay can work with you there. I bring that up. It's something you're naturally going to think about, but once you start going down that road, you can have this long section you add, and it's better to keep it on the simple side. Overall, I thought, very, very impressive. And I think it stands, a good chance of passing at the town meeting, because it is really a very solid first step.
Well, thank you. I mean, it would be a town bylaw, it would go to Westport District Court, so it would be all heard in the proper forums there. With the proper appeal, you can appeal from the clerk to a judge. That's all. You don't necessarily have to spell that out. That just happens when it is a town bylaw.
Okay. And to Marty's point, I actually think that it does make sense to keep in the references to the state statutes on business and industrial noise for the exact reason that you made. Some people say, what should I do about that? And referring to the town code makes sense.
Right. Thank you, Andrew. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. And thank you to your committee for all the time and effort with soliciting feedback and your work together to come up with this document. So just a kind of a general comment through reading through this. My kids are really loud, and reading through this, I was like, ooh, I'm sure that we cross our neighbor's property when we're outside with loud noise a lot, right? And everybody's been home more over the last 2 years, and every chance we get, we send our kids outside. So to me, I don't think that was the intent, was to, have an opportunity for my neighbors to call me for, 11 a.m. My kids are screaming at each other outside. But I just don't think it's clear enough to not have that happen. So if you could take that back to kind of think from that perspective on, the intent here is not to have kids not being able to hear kids outside. I think you're never going to get away from that, but and again, I don't think that was your intent. From reading this, I could see how somebody could perceive that this would be in violation of the bylaw.
Chelsea, to ask that point, what part did do you remember?
Yeah, so it's it's on the first page, lines 38 to 41. Exterior noise standards.
Okay.
Because it doesn't, at one other point in the later part of the document, it talks about noise between 11 p.m. and 7, which that's fine. I just thought that statement was kind of general on, and I just read it and thought,
okay,
it just wasn't clear.
Yeah, I can see where you got that. It's something we can definitely look at putting in the exemptions category specifically to that point.
Thank you.
All right. So actually, my one comment other than great job was the exact same as Chelsea's. I worried about, what would constitute that if I'm sitting on my deck with, having a couple friends over, and anybody that knows me knows I can be a little loud at times. And, I would hate for my neighbor to not just say, hey, can you tone it down? But, again, not being extremely loud, but I'm just as loud as Chelsea's kids. How's that? And that was my only concern. Again, I think you guys have done a tremendous amount of work. I thank all of you. You had people on your committee that hadn't even served before. Mr. Goodney, I thank you for stepping up and becoming chair, and Mr. Fling and everyone else, Mr. Mello, you guys have done such a tremendous job in such a short period of time with such a huge task. People feel very strongly about this, as you said, one way or the other. And I think you've tried to bridge that gap really, really well. So please continue on with what you're doing, and anything we can do to help you. We're certainly here for that. But thank you for.
I do have one question for the committee that we didn't really, or to the board that we didn't really, that the committee is trying to juggle. Ultimately, this will fall back in your direction. So if you have an opinion on it now, it would help us in our next meeting to help maybe streamline our meeting. The leaf blower situation seems to be one of the biggest sticking points in this. It's also one of the biggest points that is in the survey of a town. So since you guys are going to be the ones that ultimately bring this forward and refine it as you see fit, do you have a direction for us to consider on our next meeting on how you feel if we should keep or not keep a leaf blower section in, and how we should handle it just to help us kind of streamline where we're going?
All right. How about we start with Mr. Stivers?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And again, I've listened to those arguments. I guess my feeling is that it is likely to generate a sizable amount of resistance if the leaf blower restrictions are too severe. That gets into homeowners, which is going to affect, I think, a lot of people at town meeting. And it seems to me that that the number of leaf blowers that are currently proposed here is one dimension. Another dimension that I think the committee did talk about this is the duration of time for leaf blowers. And so, in fact, if you had some way to say that clearly what you don't want is somebody to come in with a large battery of huge leaf blowers and run them all day, kind of thing. But if there was a time limit on it, no more than X hours or minutes at a time, kind of thing, that might be a way to allow homeowners and other light duty users and landscapers to come in and do their job efficiently and move on, which would certainly annoy some people. On the other hand, I think that's a direction that provides some balance between commercial interests and peace and quiet. So there's no perfect solution to that, unfortunately, but that seemed to me to be one way to think about it.
We did talk about that. That's a tough one to enforce.
Sure. Yeah.
Isn't it? You're calling the police and saying start the stopwatch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On every case, that's just difficult. That's why we kind of went the route we did.
Yeah. And again, I think that it gets back to Chelsea's point about children. The current language is whatever unreasonable noise or whatever that's in the judgment of the enforcement person. And so again, that creates, I think, a fair amount of latitude there for those kinds of things, which might subsume the leaf blower issue as well, to figure out, what's reasonable, unreasonable, and have some flexibility there. But I can't think of any perfect way to do that, unfortunately. But that's I think, a key to getting it passed, is to not create too much concern on the part of homeowners or landscapers, that they can do what they would normally do. And maybe you start with relatively flexible language there to get the thing passed. And if you get a lot of complaints, then you can come back and modify specific sections if you've got better ideas on it in the following year or two or whatever, after you've lived with it for a while. I'd rather start flexible and then tighten as you need, versus trying to get something passed that people see as too draconian and risk not getting it passed. But again, no easy answer on that one. I'm sorry, but I think that's a consideration to get it passed.
Mr. Dennington.
I guess my comment's kind of similar to Sam. I mean, so the leaf blower section is set lines 102 through 105. I think. Okay, so I thought it was, I see the logic behind it, which is that in the fall, there's really not a restriction on the number of leaf blowers you can. When you need to get rid of those leaves, you can just do it. But that during the times where it really would be, you really shouldn't be using a leaf blower, there's this restriction. That makes sense to me. I mean, you could debate this for a long time. It sounds like you've already given this a lot of consideration, so I'm not inclined to then revisit the consensus that you've arrived at. And I think that the way that you address it at the time, if you keep this the way that you address it at the town meeting, when someone says, well, I think it should be June 1st through September 1st instead, as you say, look, we had 10, 20 hours of meetings about this, and after a long discussion, here's the consensus that we arrived at. We think it's reasonable.
I mean, you're right. And it's all about balance. I mean, you got some people that don't want any leaf blowers.
Yeah.
And then you some people that want to run, 3 or 4 all year round. So we kind of came to, where do we draw the line in the sand? And that's, where we picked, hopefully we can get support from both sides. We may ultimately not get support from either, but we hope to get some support from some sides.
All right, Andrew, are you set? Okay, Mr. Healy.
Yeah, I guess 2 things. Number one, I take that out. I just, first of all, I can't imagine that from December 16th through March 14th, there are a bunch of leaf blowers blowing. So in a weird way, there's this big target that's put there with this, 2 acres and 1 versus 2 gas powered, for time periods where I can't imagine it's an issue. So why flag it, and why, the folks who are concerned about noise are going to vote for this proposal. They're not going to say it doesn't go far enough. So the people you need to be concerned about are the folks who say this goes too far. And I think I'm not sure there's any benefit to having those dates in there, because again, I just don't think there are leaf blowers. People running around with leaf blowers those times of years. So why create an unnecessarily pitched battle? The other thing is, I guess I'm a little bit confused by not Chelsea's point, but when Chelsea raised that point, I looked and there's language in here. I moved off it to look up at the leaf blower. It's under the darn. You guys know it better than me. Where's the prohibited section that says hooting's in there? There's no hooting.
Hollering, yeah.
What line is that?
That's number 1. I don't have the marked up version. It's 42 on mine, so I think it's closer to like 60 or 70 on the one you're looking at.
Well, it's on the one
76. 76.
See, with that, and that talks about between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. I'm not sure how that interplays then with the provision that Chelsea talked about, which seemed to prohibit the same sort of thing all the time.
Yeah, so the way that it's supposed to read, which we're getting Jay Tellerman's feedback on, is the exterior noise standard is supposed to just be as a general standard for what's deemed, what's the word, Pete? Good, like just good citizen, just like a general disturbance. And it's just to kind of be a blanket statement to help cover for anybody that's just making egregious noises for no reason. And then there's, and further through the document, it defines what some of those activities would be prohibited specifically and what some of them would be exempt. Disturbing the peace, that's what it is. So that statement's supposed to just be a general statement kind of based upon mass state law of what disturbing the peace is. And that's where that exterior noise standard was taken from. So we have a general just disturbing the peace statement, and then items are specifically within or beyond that scope. And I could see how a kid could be considered within that scope. So having an exemption specifically for that does make a lot of sense, at least from my standpoint.
Yeah, you don't want parents lined up against you. My kids are beyond, well, not I think that bad. Geographically, they're beyond violating this bylaw, although they probably still could if they were in Southborough. But Chelsea's is a good point. I guess I was focused more on the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I think those timeframes, I think most of the timeframes you have in here make a lot of sense. That's it for me.
Thank you. Chelsea, I think I missed you. Sorry. I went out of order that time. Sorry.
I think
Sorry.
Chelsea,
You digitized again, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Chelsea, it's your noise suppression setting inside Zoom.
There you
Or you've been silenced by the noise bylaw.
All right, she's going to come back in. I also looked at the leaf blower. I'm actually fine with whatever you guys. So you're probably getting the same opinions you're getting from the public. You're probably getting from this board as well. I think we've given you a smorgasbord. I don't know that we've necessarily helped you.
Okay.
Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Can I surmise what you guys are saying? You'd like us to continue to have something in there, bring it back to you, and then you guys can decide from that point whether or not it's in the final version that you would take to the warrant.
Sure.
Okay.
And we'll go back to Chelsea quickly. Chelsea, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So I would prefer to take the leaf blower out. I think that's going to generate a lot of debate. And I think you have a lot of other really good things in here that I would hate to take away from a simpler version. So I would be in favor of taking it out, but obviously you guys have, listened to the public. So I also, don't want to discredit what, the work that you put into it either. But that's just my personal opinion.
That's what we asked for.
I mean, Chelsea, you make a great point, and I could be swayed either way. So I'll be honest. I don't have a strong opinion. I know that people have issues with leaf blowers. I know you guys have heard that a lot. So obviously, we'll leave it up to your best judgment, and it'll come back to us, and we can hash it out again if we need to.
I mean, you did mention we have a lot of new people that haven't served before, and we do want to make sure that this actually passes that town meeting, and you guys hold more experience than anybody on that subject. So if you can guide us into areas that are more acceptable on the town meeting floor, that's obviously the route we want to take. So.
Okay, and I think town council too is going to give you some really good guidance. I think he's going to look potentially at this leaf blower thing as well, as kind of as Marty referenced. I think. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I mean, I think Chief Paulus made some terrific points in his conversation. And right now they don't have anything, and that's why getting the general contours of what you have with the hours and the unreasonable, et cetera, is going to give the police the ability to address 99.3% of the issues, and adding in, more particular language that addresses that additional, 0.5%. I'm just not sure it's worth the fight. Get the damn thing passed.
Okay, I agree. Yeah. Go ahead, Sam.
One last comment, Sam.
I think I agree on the leaf blowers, removing that. I think that would go a long
Okay.
way toward getting it passed. So I would be on board for removing that language for now.
All right, Andrew. So there's now, I'll agree with that. How are you on removing the leaf blower?
Seems like I'm outvoted. So, my thinking was, if you take this out, isn't that one of the first questions you're going to get asked is, well, did you consider leaf blowers? And you could say, well, it's covered by this very general language. If you keep it in there, you have something that's, again, it's not really, it wouldn't be that difficult to comply with. And if someone wanted to take it up, they could. So it looks like, again, I'm fine with keeping it in, but it looks like a majority of people want you to take it out.
Okay. All right. How's that? Direction.
Thank you.
That's a
Thank
good
you.
thing. Again, guys, thank you very much. Thanks for hanging around. And again, please share our thanks with your committee and all the great things you guys have done. We
Will do.
appreciate it.
Good night, folks.
Good night, folks. All right. We're going to speed the rest of this along. So we have chair's report. I'm going to keep this relatively brief. I wanted to share that Russ Mulholland has passed away. Vanessa was kind enough to craft some information for me. She has had a very long relationship with him. That Russ had served on the personnel board for more than 20 years, starting in 1995. The other boards that she believes he served on was the Cable Committee, Advisory Planning Board, the Industrial Development Commission. In addition, he participated in search committees or interview panels for town administrator twice, town planner 4 times, town accountant 2 times, treasurer collector, police chief 2 times, fire chief 2 times, and at least a dozen other assistant department heads and admins. Conversations with Russ always ended with, "What can I do for you?" The most important skill that Vanessa learned from him is something he always asked many of us often, whether during performance reviews, discussions, mentoring staff, or organizing planning. What are we doing well? What can we improve? And what should we stop or start doing? So condolences to the Mulholland family. He served this town well for a very, very long time, and the board sends their deepest condolences. Thank you, Vanessa, for putting that together. Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, I did for Vanessa. When did Russ pass?
Just yesterday morning, Marty.
Okay, all right, because I hadn't seen anything. Yeah, no, in 1995, he was on the personnel board as the chair. So he's
I was thinking that.
He's an absolute gem. So that is so well spoken, Lisa, and I think all of us join in those sentiments.
All right, thank you. Next, I just wanted to update the town, the public, that the fire department has been awarded 2 grants, one for $4,575 and $2,855 from the state for student and senior fire education. So kudos to them for doing that. That is all I have for chair's report. Is there anything somebody wanted to add, didn't add for members? I see nothing. Okay. Town Administrator Vanessa, did Mark give you anything in his stead?
Nope, I have no other
Okay.
reports.
That's great. So now we're going to come down to consent agenda. Are there any holds for A?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
that's 3. Okay. Okay, B. Okay. We took care of C. D. I see none. We're taking off E, F, and G at this point. It may come back. I think there may have been a mistake there. H and I. Okay. That being said, let me see if I don't screw this up because we went so out of order. Do we have a motion to approve agenda items B, D, H, and I as printed
So
in
moved.
the, thank you.
Second.
All right, roll call. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio. Aye. Great. Thank you very much.
I don't think you
That-
got me.
Chelsea.
I don't think you got me.
Oh my God. Can you
Did you
tell
say
him in the
Chelsea?
middle? Can you tell him in the middle of a migraine?
So
Yes,
Malinowski,
Chelsea,
aye.
sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. That least goes back to A. All right. Chelsea, why don't you start?
So my edit was on the 15th. And it was row 334. Sorry, I'm just getting there. And it says, this evening, the board resolved the free cash issue, so a placeholder is not needed. I don't think that one of the placeholder articles was related to free cash. So I wasn't sure what that was for. At least I don't remember having an article related to free cash.
No.
So Lisa, why don't you come back to me and I'll look up to see what the old warrant looked like, because I don't have it in front of me.
Oh, I probably have it because I was going off the old one earlier. But if you want to check, Chelsea, I'll come back to you. That's fine.
Okay.
Mr.
all right.
Stivers, let's start with
Okay.
the 8th. Want to
The
start
8th.
with the 8th, Sam? Thank
Yeah,
you.
8th. Line 34, elude should be allude. E-L-U-D-E should be A-L-L-U-D-E. Major point. That's all I've got for the 8th.
Okay, Andrew, did you have anything for the 8th?
Yes. In line 16, it should say, he added there are current matters where Mr. Smith's firm and Con Cavanaugh represent separate clients in a related matter. And it should say, and in some other cases, he was adverse to clients of Mr. Smith's firm. Laredo is spelled L-A-R-E-D-O. So again, that's on, it's really the changes on 16 and 17. Instead of some of these cases, now you want to say, and in some other cases. Averse is adverse, Laredo is Laredo. And on line 21, I think law firm should be agency, and averse should also be adverse.
Okay, Andrew, thank you. Chelsea, did you find what you were looking for?
No, not yet. Sorry.
No,
It's
no,
a
no.
big packet.
Hold on 2 seconds. I was going off the old, so hold on. I probably actually have it.
Okay.
Sorry. Give me 1 second. I shifted all my papers around. Okay. Did it say what our, Chelsea, where was it in the draft again?
It was
Sorry.
on the bottom. It was on the bottom of the warrant. And it was one of the unnumbered articles, I think.
Okay. Oh, the ones that were taken off?
Yep.
All right. No, I only have, I thought I had the old one. Hold on.
This isn't in the packet. For some reason. Oh, okay, hold on. It was in the supplemental packet. I was in the wrong.
Okay.
So the articles that we took off. Oh, we did have an article related to transfer a sum of free cash to stabilization fund. So maybe we're okay. Maybe I'm okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm fine. I don't need to change. Sorry about that. The article was called transfer of a sum of free cash to stabilization fund. So we were going to have to do that if we decided to not take the 333.
Okay.
Never mind. I'm good.
Okay. February 15th.
I have several there.
Okay, Sam, go ahead.
Line 15, proscriptive should be prescriptive. Big points here. Line 294 should be item E, just mislabeled. Line 353, address should be addressed. The second time there are two addresses addressed in that line. And line 402, Mr. Fling's address is 18 Main Street. And that's it for me.
Okay, Andrew, did you have any for the 15th? Sorry.
On line 94, I think it should be reserve fund transfer to cover instead of for cover.
Was that it, Andrew?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Chelsea, did you have any on this one?
I didn't. Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve open session meeting minutes, February 8th, 2022 and February 15th, 2022 as amended?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski. I did forget
Aye.
you. And Ms. Brascio, aye. All right, thank you very much. That takes us down to other matters. We took care of A. I just wanted to talk about B quickly, that the select board appointment for the Neary Building Committee. I'd like to offer a suggestion to the board. I would be happy to temporarily fill this position until the new board is constituted, and then we can permanently fill that for the balance of the building committee, 3 to 5 years or whatever it may be. I'm just throwing that out there to the board. I anticipate there'll only be a couple meetings before the election, and, then.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, boy, I
Third.
didn't expect that.
You're
Wow,
elected.
okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. It's late. Okay, roll call. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski, and Ms. Brascio, aye. Okay, item C has been requested to be taken off by the town clerk at this time. So there is no item C. That leaves us to public comment. If any from the public would like to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, I see none. I thank everyone for hanging around. Vanessa, can you bring town council over while I do this? At this time, we have a motion. The board will be entering into executive session for MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, and not returning to open session to 1, review and approve executive session minutes from February 8th, February 15th, February 17th, exemption 7, and 2, to continue to discuss the complaints or charges brought against a historical commission member, exemption 1.
So move.
Is there a second? Thank you.
Second.
Roll call. Mr.
Okay.
Dennington.
Okay, can we have a discussion on this? We're talking about, I see two different issues here on the executive session minutes of February 15. I definitely think are, executive session. But I think in light of the fact that there's been continued publicity about the whole matter, but the disciplinary matter, I just wanted to raise the issue of whether it needs to be an executive session or not.
And we have, Marty, do you want to speak before we go to Kate on that?
I'll just say that I think, I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree with Mr. Jenningson's point, but I think that I'd rather discuss it in executive session about whether, because if we discuss it in open session, we've kind of already made the decision.
Yeah, and I agree as well, Andrew. I think that this
Okay.
board has upheld the sanctity of the executive session, and I think we should until we conclude the matter.
Okay.
Okay, roll call.
So
Mr.
we do-
Dennington.
Aye.
Go ahead, Andrew. Okay.
said aye.
Oh, okay. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio, aye. Thank you. We are in executive session. Why don't we take a 3-minute refresher, Kate? I know you've waited around a long time, but if we, unless the board just wants to move on, we could take a 3-minute break, and
I need a 3-minute break.
let's take a 3-minute break. All right, we'll see everybody back here, and that'll give Vanessa time to close out